episode of Video Game Logic. Today's show was recorded on May the 29th, 2018. I'm your host, Gaming Psychologist, and with me, as always, I don't even know what to say for this go-around.
Well, the microphone's actually recording this time, so caffeine rage.
There you go. On today's show, we are first going to be discussing some unfortunate news. Total Biscuit passes away at age 33. Then we'll move on to the games that we played this week. We'll have our May Gameclub game, which is Battletech. We'll reveal our next Gameclub game. Star Citizen offers the Legatus pack.
The ludicrous.
The ludicrous pack for $27,000 US. Yes, 27,000. We'll have our weekly community corner. Timestamps will be in the show notes following their respective topics. Hello again, Rage.
Sorry. We were about 5-7 minutes in, and I looked up to Audacity and saw flatline after me talking. Usually a bad sign. Windows sucks.
Yeah.
It changed my recording settings again.
Because we were only a few minutes in, we started over.
Yeah,
if we'd been like a half an hour in, I would have said, fuck it, we're going to use the Skype recording for the first part.
Yeah, and honestly, the Skype recording is not great quality.
Probably what I would have done would have separated the Skype tracks out, because each of us gets our own track in that recording, and I would have just synced your track up, so you would have sounded crummy for a little while, and then you would sound good again.
Well, as good as I can be, at least.
Which is pretty good in my book.
Well, for some reason, whenever you found out that I played the saxophone, you were just, of course.
Well, of course you'd play a saxophone. It fits your voice perfectly. You've got a sexy voice, so you'd play a sexy instrument.
I just found that hilarious. Of course you do.
Of course you do. Of course. So, let's see. What did we talk about? We discussed your move and the bonus episode. So we did a bonus episode because originally we thought you might be out of pocket for recording next week. So we wanted
it really
something...
depended on just when the lease was signed for the new apartment and when I could get stuff moving. But because of... well, honestly, I blame myself on this because there was a chance I would be able to get the lease signed today, but I was also told that it might be tomorrow because here's a funny thing that actually I didn't mention last time. So, a little bit more pander, a little bit more talky bit is that okay? The apartment manager is actually went on a week-long vacation and got back today. And she was talking about because everything would back up, there was a chance that I wouldn't even hear from her till tomorrow. So usually when she calls early morning because she knows I'm a creature of the night. Well, I didn't hear anything till about 11 o'clock noon, so I decided, okay, I guess I'll be tomorrow. Turned off the ringer on my phone and went to sleep, and then she called within an hour.
Of course she did.
Of course.
That's how it always goes.
Yeah. So I don't get to even start procedures until tomorrow, which means, unless for some reason my local ISP decides to take pity on me, I'm probably looking till mid next week, till the cable guy shows up. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah, so it's almost certain at this point we'll be running that bonus episode, which is fine. I might cut it up into two. We were, I think, intending to go somewhere between an hour and a half and 2 hours, and we wound up recording like a full 3 hours. So
yeah, and we didn't even touch a topic that we had on the docket.
Yeah, but we had
we had a guest.
Yeah, and he and I both had to go to bed. So I was dragging pretty bad at work today. I was really happy I had 3 no-shows. Normally that's annoying to me whenever clients don't show up when they're supposed to, but today I was like, oh, thank God, I can just close my door and lay my head on my desk for 15 minutes before I have to get up and go check on a few things.
Lay down on the couch?
Unfortunately, I don't have a couch at my new office. I've asked for one, but I don't think I'll get it. This is more of like I was going to say like an office setup, but it's an office no matter what. It's more of think more like medical as opposed to more clinical. like therapy clinic
Why
type
don't you
stuff.
just bring in a hammock?
I'm gonna bring in like some beanbag chairs or something, I think, because they're not against the rules. Like there's certain things you can't have for building safety and things like that because this is a really big corporate. Well, not corporate. They're not corporate, but they're a really big mental health company, so they have some pretty strict rules for like safety and fire hazards and stuff. But
Oh, so
beanbag
no
chairs
jungle
don't
gym.
break.
Okay.
Beanbag chairs don't break any of the rules, so I think I'm gonna bring in beanbag chairs.
Get some of the huge ones.
Yeah, and then I can take naps in my office again.
Or
I
how about the beanbag chair that's also like the giant teddy bear?
And then it can give you hugs. I tried pushing all of my chairs together to take a nap today, but that didn't work out so well. And I don't want to just lay in the floor. I don't know how often the cleaning crew comes. I'm not just going to lay down on the floor in there.
Now I'm just imagining a Roomba just bumping into you repeatedly to wake you up.
I'm going to get like a mat of some kind, maybe like a yoga mat or something, do stretches and exercises at work. And that and a cushion would be good enough to lay on the floor and take a nap on. So, or I could just do work and then leave early every day. I left the office at 4:30 today because I could.
So do we want to do a less crass segue into this? Because happy accident. We get to throw that away.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I would have left it in. I have no shame.
But, let's put it this way. It was bad enough for me to go, wow.
So moving on to our first news topic, Total Biscuit, news top announcement, whatever. We just felt like it was appropriate to have this first in the show. But yeah. Total Biscuit passed away last week. He lost his battle, whatever people like to say, with cancer.
Yeah, it's always. I'm never really sure what to say about the fight against cancer or someone deal with cancer because it never seems like it's quite appropriate. If that makes any sense.
Yeah. People usually do that to, like, psychologically. Having an enemy can give you a boost to your mental health, which can help play out to you having a better physical health. But it's always felt weird to me to say that because cancer is just, it's just cells that.
Yeah, it's you. That's the thing.
Yeah. But, I never, ever would deny someone, like, whatever they wanted to call their cancer. But, yeah, just from an outside perspective, it's a little bit weird. But, yeah.
Well, at one point, he was calling it Battlefront 2, so. And no, I'm not joking. That's actually a tweet he did.
Nice. But, yeah, the news came, was it late last week?
It was Thursday, I believe.
Thursday.
It was it was Thursday because the co-optional had just come out, and it was really, really kind of awkward hearing Jesse talk about. Well, we'll get TB on here next week and talk about this.
Yeah. Yeah, I posted a tweet to say that it was a little bit weird for me to be weeping for a man that I'd never met, but we based our entire show off of the show that he created.
Yeah, the general idea with a little bit of Cast thrown in as well.
Yeah, but I always had always had the utmost respect for him and the way that he just conducted himself, both as like a journalist, critic, pundit, and also in the way that he did his business. He was always very open about everything, full disclosure. I always respected anything that he had to say, even if I necessarily didn't agree with it. Because I always felt like he was very open about his own biases and was honest with everyone. Which is sadly pretty rare.
Yeah, it's tough for me to even think of someone that even approaches that, to be perfectly honest, because he was such a rare breed when it comes to games criticism. To the point where it's tough for me to even call anyone else a critic based around the example that he gave. To the point where he actually shut down his mail because developers kept sending him stuff, and he felt uncomfortable being able to review something that he got swag for. To me, that is a lot of integrity. because it's very easy to say, oh, well, I got this, I got a cool t-shirt, or I got, a bottle of bourbon or whatever. And, kind of play it off.
Yeah.
But he saw the inherent bias that it may impose, even, an unconscious bias, and he wanted no part of it. He wanted to be as honest and forthright as possible. And to do that, he cut himself off from a lot of swag. I will admit that he was far from perfect, and he really focused a lot on the negative things people would say about him. And that's generated a lot by just how he handled his game reviews. Or he wouldn't even call them reviews, he called them first impressions, which I kind of picked up as well.
Yeah, he was always very open and honest about that fact, too.
Yeah.
And several years ago, he said, hey, I go to therapy for this stuff. Like, I have to, because I recognize it's a problem that I have.
Yeah, and because I do wish that he was more communicative with his audience directly, instead of speaking to, but not with. But I do understand why, because he generated a lot of hate for some of his opinions, and some of it is, very odd that people got that caught up over. Him disliking a game for mechanical reasons and people throwing shit at him.
Yeah,
I never understood that at all. Let alone a game critic talking about specific mechanics. I mean, it's one thing to have, I think it was IGN talking about, Pokemon, this Pokemon game is not good because it has too much water. Instead of breaking down various mechanics and various battle mechanics, for example.
Yeah.
I do think that it's going to be a tough act to follow for anyone to be even close to the powerhouse of game review, game criticism that Total Biscuit was. There are a few out there that's kind of pretenders to the throne, but no one even close.
Yeah. And even the ones that get, closer to that have very different approaches than TB.
Yeah.
Like one of the people that comes to my mind the most, the two biggest ones that come to my mind the most as not necessarily replacements, but people that have similar sort of mantles are Angry Joe, whenever he does his really big dissecting a thing videos, which are pretty rare.
Yeah, he doesn't do that often. He's more of a game reviewer, and honestly, it feels like he gets caught up in the game a little too much, and he does a little bit too much pomp and circumstance, especially with some of the cosplay, that it just puts me off.
Yeah.
Or he may not even do it anymore. I haven't watched him in ages. It felt very cringy to me, and I just couldn't watch it.
Well, he does less of that now and more whenever he has those videos, not necessarily his reviews, but his videos where he just like talks about a thing. He just, talks into the camera, but he's not quite as good at organizing his thoughts, or either that or he's worse of an editor than TB was when it came to expressing those thoughts. And also, I mean, they call him Angry Joe for a reason. I don't know how much of that is a character and how much of that is his personality, but he will be in the middle of something and he'll get riled up and he'll yell, like just start screaming and be like, fuck this, they're dumb, or they fucked it up, or whatever. And like, I get that sentiment, but the idea of those videos, to me, the idea of those dissections is not to yell and shout and scream, but to present your position from a very logical standpoint.
Yeah, which it's kind of funny you talking about that with someone on the line called Caffeine Rage.
Yeah,
but even then, I'm actually kind of mellow for everything for my name.
Yeah, the only other person that comes to mind, and it's both for very different reasons. Angry Joe, because of the audience size that he has, which means that he has a higher level of potential influence. The other one is Jim Sterling. Jim Sterling is very character heavy, but he's doing more content here lately that's less his Jim fucking Sterling son character and more just him talking. which is closer to what he has or what he's like on his podcast, for example, the Podquisition.
Mm.
But I think Jim has got the industry experience and the know-how and the intelligence to have the same level of discussion that TB did. And he's been to some of those really big industry events. Like he was one of the people that went to Valve when they had their whole deal, like last year, whenever it was, about all of those big changes that they were supposed to be implementing that we still haven't really seen, and all that jazz.
Yeah,
And he's one
with
of the
Valve, who knows if we'll see him.
And Jim was one of the people that they had in their sort of YouTube's pilot program where they're supposed to have lawyers available if they ever get sued, and I'm not sure what's come of that. But like Jim has been in the right places and talked to the right people, and I think he's got what it takes to do it. But his audience size is much smaller. I mean, it's gigantic compared to you or I or most YouTubers, but in the grand scheme of things, like he was only like a fifth. His channel was only like a fifth or sixth of the size of TB's, which cuts down on the potential influence that he has. I mean, his channel's growing. He's been at it for a while, but those are the two that come to my mind that get the closest. There's probably some others that I'm not aware of, but
yeah. Well, there's a couple of the YouTubers I'll constantly linked to in the show notes. Sid Alpha and Yang Ye are closer on the news front, even though Sid Alpha doesn't put out nearly as much stuff. He has a day job still, so he'll go several days without posting anything and be behind the curve. And Young, it's a little cringy at times, but he also focuses on a handful of topics, but goes really in depth on them. So, there are more news focused reviewers out there, or I should say, personalities. Which TV did go into that and dabble in that some, but not nearly as much. He was more on the game criticism side of things. That's not to say that he wouldn't comment at length on topics, because he would. But it wasn't his primary focus. And then there's only a reviewer I really follow constantly right now. I just did add a bunch more gaming YouTuber, so we're going to have to see how that kind of shakes out in the long run for me. ACG, Angry Centaur Gaming, does really good reviews, but that's more full reviews and not first impressions, and it's more of a edited, curated thing than what TB did, which was more stream of consciousness, first impressions after the first either a few hours or a handful of hours, into some cases several dozen hours, depending on the game. So, it's going to be a tough mantle for anyone to pick up.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that, rushing people to replace Total Biscuit, but, there is a power vacuum now, and it's a position that has to be filled to, because he was looking out for the little guy. He was looking out for the consumer. He was always consumer first. And that got him into hot water several times with the major game companies. And I think that's part of the reason why I really respected him. Was that he would be a consumer advocate in a industry that is quickly becoming, fuck over the consumer as much as possible until the government catches on.
Yeah. It's all heavy stuff.
Yeah, I didn't catch the co-optional this week. I was sleeping at the time.
I missed the live show.
Yeah, they're having a memorial. I did put my Twitch Prime thing to Total Biscuit this month. It was the first month I had Twitch Prime and immediately went to him. So I'll be able to catch it if I wanted to tonight. Not sure if I want to watch it, though, instead of just listening to it, because it may be a bit much.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to watch it or listen to it. I'll probably wind up listening to it, but I might watch this one just specifically out of reverence.
Granted, it has been a week, so the wounds are still fresh, but they've had time to pack the wounds to dress them. so they could start to heal.
Yeah.
But I cannot imagine what Jen is going through right now. I mean, it's bad enough losing a husband to a lung disease like this, but on top of it, him being such a public personality and seeing the internet catch a light, it must be both humbling and just incredibly sad for her.
Yeah.
Because he is, the news of his passing is #1 on the games sub r/games, period. On top post now. I mean, he beat out the Nintendo president dying of cancer. Was it last year or year before?
I don't remember.
I mean, that should tell you just how influential he was.
Yeah. All right. I think I'm ready to move on.
Yeah.
To the games that we played this week, if you are.
Yeah, I think so. I think we've talked about it enough, at least for now. It may pop up again at some point. Because there were people that were being dicks, of course. There was an ex-BioWare employee. Did you see that?
Yep, I saw that. I wasn't going to talk about it, just sort of out of reverence to the whole situation.
Well, it was more, for the most part, people were very respectful to it, but, it just makes the occasional asshole even more of an asshole.
Yeah.
And that's all I'm going to really say about it. So, games?
Indeed, games. What games did you play this week?
Well, I've got 4 of them. And hey, we have a 4th game starting right off. Dirt 4. This was a free-to-try game over the weekend. And I tried it. And it got bumped back several places on my wish list because of it. I guess I should really say right now, I'm actually a fairly decent fan of the Dirt series, and I like my off-road games a lot more than I do on-road racing. Maybe it's just the fact that growing up in the late 80s, early 90s, there was this huge popularity on TV of arena trucks, and it kind of forged that in my mind that, racing should be off-road and have jumps.
Jumps do make racing better.
I mean, if you've ever seen arena trucks and some of the crazy shit that they used to do, you would see how it influenced me. So the Dirt series is rally racing, for the most part, with some off-road racing and rallycross, which is on-road / off-road. And Dirt 4 is, actually not the 4th game in this series, because there's Dirt Rally and there's a couple others. There's Dirt Showdown that I can think of off the top of my head. And Dirt 4, it's okay.
Okay.
And it's just okay. I think that's probably the biggest problem with it, is that Dirt 3, it had its problems, but it still had its fun game modes, and it still had a lot of personality. And this, they stripped a lot down to it just having 4 game modes. It has the pure rally, which is actually the meat of the game, which is pretty much standard for most of the Dirt games. It has a off-road racing circuit. It has rallycross, and it had one other that I couldn't unlock. And they stripped things like Land Rush, which is essentially the rally mode, only like twice or 3 times the speed. A lot of the more fun events, like gate crashing, where you have these giant styrofoam blocks and you're trying to get as low a time as possible on a rally course, but every time you hit a block, it stops the clock for a certain amount of time. They got rid of Gymkhana, which I'm okay with that one. I hated those events.
Yeah, I was going to say, I remember you didn't like those from the last Dirt game you played.
But it kind of tells you, where we're going with this. They got rid of the showdown events, where it's a one-on-one on-road race. where it's a split track, so that diverges, but you have to do 2 laps. Essentially, you're on the inside and outside lane, and it's like a giant Mobius strip. All right, so as you're racing one line, it slowly transitions to the other, and after 2 laps, you've ran the entire course. They've gotten rid of that, and it just feels like a very, very stripped down version of Dirt. To the point where, it's just, it lost a lot of its personality. I think they saw the success that they had with Dirt Rally and just decided that they didn't need some of the more personality that the game had. They could survive off the original, or off a more streamlined version of it. And it just doesn't do it for me. To the point where it feels like that Dirt Rally was almost a step backwards for the entire franchise because it's shifted focus so much. So going into this, there's actually 2 different control methods, and they're trying to straddle the line between an arcade sim and a more full sim. But to be perfectly honest, neither version of it really feels right. So going in, you have 2 options. The play for fun arcade mode, which feels a lot more arcadey than Dirt ever was, and the sim mode, which feels like a arcadey version of Dirt Rally. And honestly, the sim mode may as well be, okay, so you want to lose. Because, that's one other thing they removed. They removed the rewind function.
Okay. Why?
I can't tell you because I have the foggiest. Granted, turning it off in the previous Dirt games and Grid games and pretty much any Codemaster game since like the original Dirt. Outside of... Did they do the F1 games? I think they do. Yeah, they do the F1. That's like the only Codemaster games that doesn't have a rewind function. Turning it off is the extreme hard mode. Mostly because the AI are dicks, and they continue to be so in this game, to the point where they'll bump you off the road and then just continue going. And because you don't have the rewind function to try to counteract that now, you're going to lose on the last lap of a 5 to 10 minute race. And because the races are like this perfect length of sure enough where it's bite size that, it doesn't feel like that long, but long enough where whenever you're screwed up on the last lap, it feels just all the more galling. And if you're screwed up on the first couple of laps, you feel like you just have to, it's best just to restart because you don't have enough time to even catch up. And the simulation mode just makes your car even more slippery, especially on some of the dirt tracks that, it's just not even worth trying, trying to make up that lost time. And I gotta be perfectly honest, I never even saw the AI screw up once, which is also a feature of Dirt, where, every so often the AI will go too fast into a turn and spin out or something. Never saw that once, actually, now that I really think about it. It's just, it feels like another company was trying to make a Dirt game. You know how you have the carbon copy games that just never quite hit all the marks?
Yeah.
That's what this feels like, honestly. It's just very, very shallow. The career mode is very short. They borrowed the almost roguelite aspect from Dirt Rally that has the endless courses. So the courses don't really have any personality. You end up getting the same ones over and over again, or chunks of the same ones over and over again. It has very few courses or course bounds or themes. It only had, even the closed circuit tracks for the off-road racing. I did 4 or 5 events, and I was already on the same track the third time. I was getting repeated tracks over and over and over again. Only this time, hey, it's this track. Only this time it's raining, so it's even worse. Ugh. I probably will pick this up at some point, but it is definitely not a $60 game. It's not a $15 game. This is a sub $10 game. This is a $5 game. Especially, since their DLC is mostly cheat DLC as well. And, well, let's just put it this way. I don't think there's much of an online community around this game. I think they were sticking with Dirt 3, and for good reason. Oh, and the menu system sucks.
Okay.
About the only positive thing is, since they lost a lot of the personality of the game, they lost a lot of the over-the-top personality as well. So maybe losing personality isn't so much of a bad thing. You know how they were rather extreme on it in the previous Dirt games?
Yeah.
It's not like that at all now. It's pretty much just, hey, you're a driver in this race series. Okay, now you can buy a car and make your own team, and that's pretty much it. There's not as over the top. But at the same time, it kind of tells you just where they went with this game. I would say if you have the setup, Dirt Rally is definitely a lot better game. But it's more on the simulation side, so if you're playing with a control pad or a gamepad, it's a little bit tougher to handle because it can be a little bit fiddly. But I would say Dirt 2 or Dirt 3, which I don't think Dirt 2 is even on Steam anymore. And I'm not sure about Dirt 3, actually.
Dirt.
Yeah, I'm just looking real quick. I actually don't see the third Dirt game anymore.
Yeah, I don't see it either.
Yeah, I know that they
pulled
pulled...
Dirt Rally and Dirt 4?
Yeah, I know that they pulled the second game. I guess they pulled the third one as well. Because of car licensing things, so... Oh, well, I guess piracy.
Woohoo, piracy.
And it really saddens me that this game isn't that great.
I think I have Dirt 3.
I mean, it's that weird middle ground where it's not good, but it's not terrible either. Because outside of going full simulation, and on some of the harder difficulties where you have all your traction control turned off, you have all the assists turned off, and especially in the simulation mode, it's just it feels very loose, and it doesn't feel like you're actually driving along the ground. That makes any sense?
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
It's just very, very disheartening for me. Because I actually really like the Dirt series, and I guess I'm going to have to find another rally game or, see what they do with the fifth Dirt game, because the overall feelings of this game is mixed. And I don't think the free weekend did them any favors.
Doesn't sound like it. At least not with you. So, what else did you play this week?
Okay, so here's one that you were nearly putting on your wish list. It's like, no, wait, I need to hear what you said about it because you're learning. Mercury Fallen. This is... Okay, I'm going to try to do the elevator pitch every so often for these games because it's a lot easier to try to quantify it. Think RimWorld plus Dungeon Keeper.
Okay.
Where it's the same general feel of RimWorld where you are managing a colony, but you have less direct control than even RimWorld has, where you could tag things as high priority, and that's about it. It's pretty much just a sit back and watch game, which isn't a bad thing. It's, it requires a little bit more thought. And it's an interesting start. It's still in the very, 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 very early stages of its early access run, to the point where it feels like there's not much there yet outside of the very base of the game. There's absolutely no combat, which I'm not sure if there's going to be. The exploration mechanics aren't in yet, so that really limits what you can do because you just have the actual base building mechanic and not the extended stuff. the research is very sluggish to do, and it's a very linear research tree, even though it doesn't look it. I think the screenshots does it have a... No, it doesn't have a shot of the research tree. It does have a research tree, but it was the same problem I actually had with Judgment, is that it's interwoven. So in order to, even to cook, actually, you have to research a different thing than you would expect, because the big thing is, for these games, is to establish your resource chain. And your first thing you always want to do is have a source of food. You usually get a starter, a few days worth of food, and that's about it. So you need to start getting your food. Well, in this, you're growing potatoes, because of course. I guess the Martians' influence has gone very broad and wide, huh?
Indeed. Well, potatoes are the best, so.
Yeah, until you run out of ketchup.
Well, then you just put Vicodin on it.
Well, in order to cook the potatoes, you first have to research that, because, of course you do, right? But then,
of course,
I discovered, I didn't research water, which hadn't been a priority until then, because nobody really needed water. They just did things, which is an oddity whenever you think about it, because water is usually a bigger problem than food. So I got to the end of the cooking research and thought, I can't cook, and I'm nearly out of food. Turns out you pretty much have to have someone researching 24/7, at least in the current build, to be able to even try to survive, because the research is so damn slow and there's no way to prioritize directly. You can do a set of priorities, very RimWorld, Dwarf Fortress, or Dwarf Therapist-esque, where you could set essentially a hierarchy for each colonist. Where, if set like priority 1 jobs, or in this case it's actually priority 10, and it goes down to 1 for lowest. Priority 10, they'll look at their list going from left to right, find the first 10, see if there's anything for that. Find the next 10, see if there's anything to do with that. You go down the list. You can do that in this, but there's no direct interaction, which is... it's fine for the Dungeon Keeper genre, but it's because sometimes you have to get some focus on a particular item, you're more beholden to the AI, which is a little off-putting. And also there's this weird system where everything is designated by its type of flooring. So if you look on the screenshots, you can see different floors. And certain items can only be built on certain floors, as in types of tiles, essentially. Not, like different levels of a building. I'm just talking about different types of tiles on a floor. And and it's just very fiddly whenever you try to build something and you don't have the proper type of tiling there. It's a system that I think works better if you're having different rooms designated, but because mining is so sluggish, at least in the beginning, you're ending up ripping up a lot of pre-existing infrastructure and swapping it out for no good reason, outside of just because we said so. That said, if this develops enough, I think it would be a pretty decent little colony builder strategy survival game. It really depends on if they're going to do combat. I'm not sure if they are. There's hints of a story here, but they haven't really fleshed it out. Every so often you'll find these resource caches. Essentially you're going to a different planet and you crash and you need to survive. And one of the escape pods is empty at the very beginning, and it's like, ooh, what's going on? And every so often you'll find a resource cache, and it'll have a player or a person's login, and you read the log entry, and it's like, huh, that's interesting. But there's not enough there to really say what the story is going to be overall, or if it's even going to be very interesting. So yeah, it's once again an interesting base, but I'm not sure how it's going to play out on the long run. And maybe it's just because I haven't played enough of these Dungeon Keeper-esque games. I do find it a little frustrating to be more beholden to the AI to go, okay, well, I'll go mine this now. Never mind the fact that, okay, I need to get the kitchen set up, but there's this one tile, and I don't have a way to designate it as a high priority. So I'm just sitting here waiting for the AI to go, okay, fine. Unless I want to go undesignate a lot of mining situation, which I actually had to at one point.
Sounds
it's interesting, but it needs
interesting.
But it needs more quality of life stuff.
I think I'm gonna not put it on my wish list, but also not mark it as not interested. I'm gonna go request a key on Keymailer, hope for the best, and if I see it for
I will say that
less than $5,
I will say that it definitely needs a art pass, because the models are very, very, very rough. You could see on one of the screenshots a good close up of some of the player models, for lack of a better term, and they're very basic. And let's just put it this way: in the very beginning, everyone's in. I had essentially 3 clones, and it was very tough to be able to tell them apart until I figured out that I was able to recolor their clothing, which it doesn't tell you that. So I was just watching essentially the 3 same people running around, as in the like triplets. And also, I don't know how you get new characters, because I never encountered that. I'm not sure if that's going to be a random event that I just didn't trigger, if there's even going to be random events in this, because I didn't see any infrastructure for it yet. It's interesting, though. I do want to see how they go through early access, and that's why I didn't do the video on it, was that it felt too rough still. And they also have the RimWorld-esque quirk system, but all of them were very bland so far. Just, this person gets tired a little bit quicker. This person eats a little bit more. But nothing really interesting like how RimWorld handles it. And I realize comparing to RimWorld is not fair at this point, but also it's kind of the measuring stick right now. Where, there's no really interesting quirks like, this person refuses to do this type of stuff, or this person likes to talk a lot more and would get lonesome. Actually, the only negative thing for someone being worked too hard is they work slower. There's no mental breaks. There's no real negatives outside of, they're working a little slower. But they do have robots in the game, so you can build robots to supplement your colonists.
Yay, robots. Robot uprising.
Kill all humans. Except for so, yeah. Moving along.
Cool. Yep.
How about a game that looked very, very, very interesting until I played it?
Okay.
Safe House. This is, on the surface, it looks almost Fallout Shelter-esque, only you're running a spy agency. It's not. It's tedious as fuck. So,
okay.
This game, you are running a safe house for spies in a made up, at least I'm pretty sure made up, African nation that's trying to overthrow a regime, okay? Your standard, except for the African thing, because usually it's like Middle Eastern or Asian or something. But each room of the safe house is essentially its own puzzle, and it's all timed. Some of them are fairly simple. The first 2 that you start off with is your classic, someone comes in and says something, and it has a code word in it, and you respond with another code word in dialogue, and then they have to have another code word to make sure that they're who they say they are. Pretty straightforward, and you're given a list of code words and the responses and everything. So, okay, easy enough. Then you have a loading dock, which has every so often a crate comes in, and you have to check the code on that against a whitelist of codes that you have. And if something is on the list, you accept it. If not, you reject it. And every time you're wrong on any of these puzzles, the game punishes you by making the faction that you're trying to fight stronger. And as the game progresses, each error becomes more and more punishing, even if you've never screwed up before. So on the first day, you may get like 400. And if you screw up, the enemy gets 400 towards a $1,200 milestone for the first one. Well, by day like 5 or 6, it's up to a couple thousand. So you screw up once and you've never screwed up before. The enemy gets 2,000. They trigger the first milestone and suddenly you're getting less money. It's an interesting way to do it, but the way that they're ramping it up so quickly is infuriating. But anyway, back to the puzzles. So, okay, first two, pretty bog standard. Then they throw cryptograms at you. Now, mind you, all of this is timed as well. So it's Papers, Please-esque, where you only have so much time. So they give you a scrambled, or not really a scrambled, but it's a simple substitution cipher. So you're given a ciphered word and a offset. So you have to look at the word and offset each letter by the number of places on the alphabet. So let's say the word starts with A, the scrambled word, and it's a plus or minus 3. Well, it may be C, or it may cycle back around to the end of the alphabet. Well, most likely it won't cycle back around, but there's a chance. And you have to do that for each word, and you also have to type it out. So it becomes very tedious, and it's also has the added pressure of a time limit. Because if you take too long, you're not able to do many puzzles, which means that you're not getting the money, which means that you're stretching out the story, which may cause problems with the overall milestones. Because you're also having to do certain things to keep up with the story. So you're seeing where the problem is coming, right?
Maybe.
Then there's the fourth puzzle. All right, and this was the last one. And this was the cryptograms were already annoying enough. Maybe it's just because I'm a dum-dum and I have to sit down and think about it. All right.
Okay.
But then you get the infirmary. All right. The infirmary. Okay. Well, agents get injured, so you have to heal them. All right. Pretty standard, right? I guess.
Yeah.
So they come in and you have to give them the proper type of blood, which is, you just give them the same blood type that they need. I assume that may do the full donor system where, there's the universal donor and universal receiver, that sort of thing. But then you have to give them the proper medication. So if they need an anti-poison, you have to look at the list of various medications that offer that thing. And then you have to look at their allergies and then compare the ingredients to each medication, which is randomized per day in its location. Look at the ingredients, see if they're allergic to it, on top of figuring out if that medication would even do the fucking thing that you need to do. And mind you, you're still on a fucking time limit. And the time limit is very, very, very short. Just a couple minutes per day. So, yeah.
That sounds incredibly frustrating and not fun.
And I wasn't even a quarter of the way full through filling up the safe house. It was like they took the idea of Papers, Please, took away all the ramp up, and just threw you in the deep end with very irritating results. And on top of that, the camera sucks. Which you may think, okay, so why is the camera so important? Well, you have to click on each individual room. And the camera is sluggish, even on its fastest speed. If you have it on its default speed, it takes you a good half the day to be able to traverse the entire building. It's just irritating. And they do have, well, I did unlock one room past the infirmary. It was the mission system, which is essentially your Facebook mobile game where you send off someone, and it takes so much time for the mission to complete off screen. And agents level up through that, but you know how that's going to play out, right? You have a percentage chance each time for the agent to get killed, and then you're screwed, and you have to build up new agents.
Right. Yeah.
I was actually somewhat excited to play this when I saw this because it looked very interesting. A Fallout Shelter-esque game with meets Evil Genius essentially. Well, maybe not Evil Genius, but a kind of cheesy spy game.
Right.
But it feels like they missed all the marks. Personally, it's just infuriating. Maybe I'm the wrong type of person to enjoy this. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think that I would like this. And also, at this point.
Well, also, it kind of tells you just how this game is put together. That the cutscenes, whenever everything kind of slides together, it does the sort of old school James Bond silhouette thing. You know what I'm talking about? Against a flat background.
Yeah.
Whenever all the pieces slide together, you can see the visible seams of the individual shapes. Where they didn't quite get together quite right in the render. And also everything has very, very bad jaggies with no anti-aliasing.
That sounds... Well, it's a neat idea if they had done it right.
Yeah, the game is a neat idea, but it's just infuriating. If they had it... if they had it with the game paused... So you weren't punished to actually sit down and think about your actions. Granted, I don't think you have a failsafe on just the time running out, but because the time is running in the background and the puzzles don't queue up, if you spend too long on figuring out a cryptogram, then you may not get people come in to do the easy thing of just swapping back and forth the passwords, which costs you a lot of money, so you don't get to build rooms or train up agents or even hire agents, because I was able to build the Black Ops Center, or whatever they called it. Well, I wasn't able to hire anyone because I had missed a couple of the missions because I spent too long on a cryptogram because I'm a dummy on those. So it's just...
Good job.
Yeah.
Oh, that was funny.
What?
I'm a dummy on those.
Well, I sat there and it's like, okay, what's 4 letters after Q? I have to sit there and think about it for a moment.
Well, I couldn't just tell you.
Oh, good. So you're a dummy as well.
It's U. Right? Q, R, S, T. Yeah, 4. U. Yay, I did it.
Yeah, but hey, that may not be the proper letter, so now you have to be 4 before.
No, I'm fucked. I can't go backwards. I'd have to go through the whole alphabet.
Yeah, that's why it's a lot tougher. Is that sometimes it's not the usual way through, so you have to sit and think even longer. And if they had it where it's just instead of typing out the words, which on top of everything else, every time you have to type, okay, you have to move the mouse, click, and then you have to click again on the text field. It doesn't automatically select it either, even though you obviously have to go to it. If they had it where you could just scroll through the letters, that would have been a lot easier. Or even whenever they had the list of words, be able to click on the words instead of having to type them out. Especially since it's the early game stuff. I can only imagine what they're doing late game. This feels like a game that is built for a particular type of person in mind, or for the developer in mind. You know how those passion projects are built around a person's vision and what they want out of the game. This feels like that. This is the game that they want, and it's not quite what anybody else would want to play. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. Yeah, I'm not interested in this game any longer.
Oh, I'm doing really well at scaring you off of games today. Well, obviously I can't do that for this next one.
Indeed, because I played it too.
Gunsmith. This was the Sunday sampler as well. This is a very, very good base, but it is lacking a lot of quality of life issues, or quality of life features, I should say. Primarily, comm scaling.
Indeed. So what this is at its core is a factory management game.
Essentially, it's big pharma meets illegal gun trade.
Yeah, so you have to build
assembly lines,
clothing, armor, body armor, weapons, ammo, to fulfill orders that various agencies, governments, or otherwise ask you to fulfill. And you start with like the most basic, as you do in these games, you start with the most basic item, which is like a pair of gloves, and eventually you can research your way up and work your way up to really complex assembly lines to produce arms to sell.
Yeah, but to get there, it's such a drag. This game, it has a lot of interesting things. This actually is a lot closer to what I wanted, which is out of Big Pharma, which is more of a factory management instead of feeling like, okay, well, I'm just raising and lowering arbitrary things. Because this has various machines, and you can see the difference. You run fabric through a fabric cutter, and you get fabric gloves, and then the gloves get fitted and put together, and they become camo gloves, and they get more sewing, and then they get shipped off to a boxing machine. What I think the game does really well is outlining the basic idea of each assembly line through its cookbook.
Yeah, I like it. I don't know why, but I like the idea that it's called a cookbook. It made me think of Breaking Bad.
Well, each item has its assembly line laid out. So some items require essentially a forked assembly line where one is making like, the early game, it's all fasteners. So making plastic fasteners out of blocks of plastic, heating it up, running it through a former to make a plastic fastener for things. And then it ties into the rest of the assembly line. And it gives you a really good idea of what to expect and what you need to do. And I think it does that exceptionally well, of explaining on the basic level what you need to do, but leaving you to fill in the blanks.
Yeah, and I didn't have any problems with this. It's got a pretty basic tutorial.
Yeah, I would say that the tutorial makes it feel a lot more complex than what it actually is. It drags it out across a lot more screens, and I think it could hold off on some other aspects than and not explain those right away, instead of just letting you set up the basic fragmented glove assembly line first, and then have you worry about, okay, now let's talk about your materials and how you acquire them to run this assembly line that you've already done, instead of going page by page and then doing that. So you're about to say?
I don't know, what was I about to say? I was saying, I didn't have any trouble learning the systems because they've done a good job. This is a game that feels like it's had some real time and effort put into it, and they've done at least a bit of proper QA testing or something, because, like you said, it's an excellent base system, an excellent groundwork for all of the quality of life improvements that need to be made to make this a really serious game, a really serious contender for my time. Because it takes the biggest problem, honestly, the only real issue that I've had so far has been how tedious it is, because you can't speed up time.
Yeah, there's in reverse, there's no pause either. So the time is always marching forward at the same rate. So while you're building your next assembly line, you also have to manage the ones that are currently out there. So that's a bit tough to do whenever the game. This is something else that I didn't like, is that it doesn't have a counter on just how much resources you have overall. It'll alert you whenever you're low resources, when you're sub 100. But once you get a couple assembly lines up and running, 100 of pieces of fabric isn't a lot, because trousers, pants take 2 each. The backpacks, the camo vests take 3 each. Gloves only take 1, but you can see where we're going with this. It takes off very quickly. And it does a pseudo market thing as well, where as you buy things, the price rises. So you have to try to balance that if you want to maximize costs, or maximize your profits while minimizing costs. And it just doesn't do it all that well yet.
Yeah. There's also random events that happen that I've seen a few of.
I only had one random event, and that was meeting a new contact, and that was it. I'm not sure if I was bugged, if it didn't happen to me or what, but I do think that they need more random events. They need something to shake things up, because it pretty much turned into an idle game for me.
I had 3 random events. I had one new contact that came that seemed like a shady dude. It was like something like this guy comes in and he's got bodyguards, and they clearly will kill you if you step out of line. And he was like, I need you to do this contract for me on the down low. And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. I don't want to start working with what sounds like an illegal operation. And he was like, you'll be sorry. And then he left. And then I had, so like the bare amount of story setup that there is, like, just for thematics, is that your father has died and left you this factory in his will, and you get what's left after the debt collectors have come and taken most of the assets of the factory.
Yeah, which funnily enough, it's just enough to break the glove assembly line.
Yeah. So anyways, this person showed up, and it was like an old friend of your father's. And he shows up, and he's like, I'll do some business with you. I always did business with your dad, and he always treated me well. And then, like, he gave me some free money, and he's like, consider this an investment in your operation. I want you to do better than your father did. And so I got like $15,000 and a contract from him, and then he left. And then I got another random event that was, I think, because I was doing like a lot of contracts for the same person, and he showed up and he was like, hey, you've been good to me and completed all my contracts on time, and I just wanted to come by and thank you for that, and I'll be doing more business with you in the future. And then I got like another contract for that one guy.
Kyle?
Yeah, thanks, Kyle, for the contract to build you some more camo gloves. From what I've played so far, it doesn't feel like it really forces you to expand and build your factory.
Yeah,
there were still plenty of contracts that just had camo gloves.
After a few hours, it was starting to get to the point where I required at least 2 or sometimes 3 of the different clothing components. So I was getting orders for backpacks, vests, and boots, for example. Or I was getting just orders for like vests and trousers, that sort of thing. And I was getting fewer and fewer of just single items. So I'm not sure if it's going to progress once I unlocked actual gun mechanics, because I would occasionally get the contract where, okay, I want this clothing and bullets, but there's a huge run up to actually making firearms at all. Bullets, let alone firearms. You have to go through about, I would say, 2 weeks worth of research in game, where you have to research individual components of the manufacturer and then obtain a license, which is another couple of days. And there's no way to speed this up.
Yeah. I kind of like the way that research works in this game. So you have to dedicate a portion.
Yeah, you allocate a portion of your profits or your overall.
It's your operating budget. A portion of your operating budget.
Yeah, I wasn't sure what it was exactly. I knew it was a portion of something.
Yeah,
to
and then that
generating
generates.
research points, which you could then invest into a research project that usually takes a day, maybe two, to run.
Yeah. But I just like the way that that system works. It feels a bit more realistic. Like, most companies, probably all companies, don't just like, I'm gonna research this specific thing. They just spend money on R&D to see what they can come up with, and then they get an idea, so they spend some time focusing on that idea to make it come to fruition. And so I like that system.
Yeah, I will say that the game runs a little rougher than I would expect. It's not that bad, but I think it's where everything is a physics object on the conveyor belts.
I did not have any problems with
It wasn't until I started recording I started hitting a little bit of a frame rate hitch.
Okay. Yeah, mine never dropped from. I think it's frame locked at it didn't get over 120, but it also didn't drop below 120, and I didn't have VSync or anything
also
turned
recorded,
on.
so. But
Yeah.
without recording, was running in the hundreds, in the 100
Okay.
range. But there's also a noticeable hiccup whenever you turn on and off a lot of machines, which is an interesting way that they handle it, where you're able to group a full assembly line to essentially one on-off switch, which I liked. Yeah. It allows you to quickly turn on and off things if you need to conserve money, if you need to shut down something that you have a lot of. Like, I went absolutely nuts about gloves because, first of all, it's the first thing that you have. Second of all, in the very beginning, there's orders for all sorts of gloves. Everybody wants the glove. So I actually expanded my thing where I got the splitter fairly quickly to split the fasteners into two glove assembly lines. So I had gloves coming out of the wazoo.
Yeah.
So I'd turn on and off that assembly line every so often, but there was a noticeable hitch whenever that happened. Also, this is a minor nitpick, but I wish that the conveyor belts was a different color because everything is camo, and you have green conveyor belts.
Yeah. I wish that you could place down a length of conveyor belt instead of it being one at a time.
Yeah. Or eventually get longer conveyor belts.
Or longer conveyor belts. Well, that's what I'm going for. Like, you place down, say, 3 conveyor belts, and they merge into one long conveyor belt.
But I have a feeling this could scratch the itch for more than a handful of players out there in our listener base, because I know we have a few Factorio fans. And this feels like pretty much what I wanted was a small-scale Factorio that made sense.
Yeah, this is definitely along those lines. It definitely needs a time speed up function.
Yeah, well, it does have a lot of room for expansion, both in the game development and the physical sense of the factory, because there's a lot of room in there.
Yeah.
They have enough room that I would say that it's easy that they would have probably 20-30 assembly lines.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of room to start before you even look at expanding the base, or the factory.
Yeah, and I wasn't exactly being constrictive on my assembly lines. I was letting them stretch out a bit, which turns it almost into a bit of a puzzle game as well. Trying to fit things together in a compact floor space.
Spaghetti factory.
I was quite proud with how I was able to set up the front end of the glove assembly line, because I was still using the original assortment for the back end of it, where the splitter was running perfectly into two of the mergers to be able to essentially fit the plastic fittings onto the gloves. And it was absolutely perfect. And the game does a good way of individual timing on the various machines as well, where most of the machines are either, at least in the early game, during the apparel phase, where it's either a 1 second or 2 second generation time, or a manufacturer time. So you're able to get the timing down fairly easily on things, especially based on everything in the cookbook. They do a lot of things really right in this, actually. I just want to see it expanded and have the quality of life stuff put in.
Agreed.
Yeah,
my
my big thing is time scale and an easier way to keep track of your resources and the market, especially since I think they're going to do more with the market as the game progresses. Assuming, of course, this continues on, because this is an extremely early access game, and this is also an unproven developer.
Yeah, I'd like to just be able to sell items directly on the open market.
Yeah,
because then you could just focus more on not necessarily the contracts. That would make the early game stuff. It sounds more viable in the late game.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially since make quite as much money.
Yeah, but especially since if you have a bunch of gloves, we'll just sell them for less profit on the open market. Sell them to Walmart.
Yeah, there you go.
One other thing that a bit irked me was just how they handled the contracts in general, where if you offer time out, you'll get penalized for it.
I hadn't noticed that, that's...
If you let it offer timeout, you take a reputation hit. The same as if you turn it down.
Okay.
So turning down or letting one time out is a reputation hit. And considering some of the offers were, they were wanting some pretty advanced ammo along with the apparel, which I hadn't even started to research at the time. It was a bit off-putting. Yeah. And also, I would like to see some sort of staff mechanic, especially handling stocks,
Yeah. Well, because there's the guy sitting over there at the table with no computer. Yeah. But yet he's typing on something.
His computer's in the mail.
Where do you get one of those internets? You get it at the airport? Is that where you get the internets?
Oh, they have internet on computers now.
Yeah, so I liked it. I'll come back and check it later. Mostly specifically for the ability to speed up time.
Yeah, as it is right now, it's essentially an idle game plus Factorio. Or small scale Factorio, I should say. Which, if you want something to sit on another screen and just kind of run in the background, well, there you go.
Indeed. And speaking of things sitting on another screen running in the background, I played Adventure Communist this week. I actually played a couple of clicker idle type games. Just to have something on the second screen running in the background.
Are you able to play these?
What do you mean, am I able to play these?
Can you actually say that you play these, or you just watch these?
You play them a little bit, I think. So Adventure Communist is the sequel, to Adventure Capitalist. It's made by the same people. I don't know if they connect, or if they just tried to, went for the theming of it. But it's a clicker game where that you are comrade, and you are building up the Soviet empire of things. And you start out growing potatoes, and then you get potato robots, and then you somehow create land, and then you mine things, and then you build weapons, and then the last thing that you do is make medicine.
Of course.
And Adventure Capitalist had this sort of it did one of those things that these clicker games sometimes do, where that you hit a point and then the game sort of evolves into something else. And Adventure Capitalist does that several times in fun and interesting ways. Adventure Communist so far hasn't done that. Aside from the theming and the really shitty theme song that it plays, that's supposed to be, I guess, some sort of Russian folk song. But there's no way to actually turn it off. There's no options menu. The image has got the sort of gear options menu on it, but these are old images because that actually isn't there in the main game. So you can't turn the music off. You can't turn, like, it's got one of those little Unity launchers that's like, what do you want your graphics settings to look like?
Unity Launcher, my old friend.
And that's it. So the only way to actually mute the terrible song is to mute my PC, which is annoying because I also listen to a lot of music at work. It's like, well, music or, well, I guess it qualifies as music. It's just a really shitty folk song.
Uh, does it not have an entry in the Windows volume mixer?
It does, but it doesn't like to be tabbed out.
At least with that attitude.
But so far, it hasn't done anything fun or interesting. It's been running for the better part of a week. I've checked on it once every day, maybe twice, just like hoping that something fun or interesting happens. And I'll probably keep checking on it a little bit, but so far I haven't found anything. Like the premium, I do like that the premium currency is comrades, research points and comrades. Those are your two like primary currencies. I think that's funny. It used to be wealth. I saw, but wealth like didn't make sense with the theme. So now you have comrades.
Should be presidents.
Oh, that would be amazing. Like if that's what it morphs into. Oh, that would be cool. And I've avoided, like, I know I could just look this up, but part of the fun of these games is like whenever the twist happens, it's like, oh, that's neat. So I don't want to cheat and look that up and then ruin that potential twist. But if in like another week, if nothing new has happened, I'll probably go and look it up and just see if there is actually a twist. But it's a, for what it's supposed to be, just a background thing you check on every once in a while between tasks at work or whatever. Perfect for that. Thumbs up. But, I mean, it's not like a game. You know what you're getting into with this. And if you don't like idle type games, then there's nothing redeeming about this, at least so far. So I can quickly move on to the next game on my list, which is a puzzle game.
Yeah, I actually got review code for this as well, but I got it too late to be able to do anything with it.
Yeah, so this game is called Inline. It's a very simple but challenging puzzle game that I think takes the idea of Tetris, like placing, the various shapes in order to clear the board. But what it changes up is that your board is a square that has got a space in the middle where you can't place anything, and that's where your next shape block shows up that you can drag and drop anywhere on the grid. And it plays like Tetris. You create a line from either top to bottom or left to right, and it will clear itself, and then you can place more pieces there in order to try and do it again. And it starts out really simply, and after a few minutes and you've increased the difficulty level by successfully placing pieces down and clearing lines and things like that, the game gets gradually harder and harder until you lose. And it starts out, you don't have to pre-plan. You can just put stuff as it comes and fill out your lines. But by sort of difficulty level 4 or 5, you have to start looking at you can see the next 3 pieces, and you really have to start planning ahead. You can also skip a piece or discard a piece. You have like a little bar that fills up as you successfully place pieces down, and you can have up to 5 skips at a time. So if you wind up in a jam, you do have a few chances to try and recover, but this is an endless puzzle game. Eventually you're going to fail no matter what, just because the game will eventually become so difficult that you can't succeed at it. But it's got a really nice, relaxing, soft soundtrack that isn't too overwhelming or powerful. So you can also listen to podcasts or your own music or whatever while you play it.
Well, that is their kind of niche, because I'm looking at their history, and they are actually the devs behind the Learn to Fly series.
Okay. But it's an excellent puzzle game, and it's really, really simple. No like major graphics or anything required. The whole install file is less than 100 megs. So this game is currently, I don't know how much it's gonna sell for. It's currently not available for purchase. If this game is like more than $5, I'll be really surprised. This is like a good $2.99, $3.99 game. I think that's perfectly going to be priced for what it is. I mean, we'll see what it actually
Yeah,
is.
this is a former Congregate developer. Inline is going to be launching at $4.99 with a 15% release sale.
$4.99 is like perfectly priced for what this game is. I've played it for 45 minutes to an hour, just in little bursts. The first time I played it was for like 15 minutes before I went to bed one night, and I played it for a couple of 5-minute chunks today at the office when I had a client that didn't show up, or I played it for a little bit when I ate lunch. It's just really good at what it sets out to do. It's an excellent puzzle game. So definitely I recommend this, especially I mean, that's the perfect price point for this game. $4.99, 15% discount at launch, so that'd put it at like 3 something.
Yeah.
Around $3.50 thereabouts.
Yeah, or regional
maybe a little
equivalent,
less.
of course.
Yeah. But I mean, it's a perfectly priced game for what it is. So that's Inline. And then on to my last game for the week. This one was an interesting little thing. Like, I saw this as another clicker game on mobile. And it's called Idle Skies, and it's an aviation themed clicker game. And I, just downloaded it as like, okay, we'll check this out and see what it is. And I was pleasantly surprised at what this is. So it's got a really nice, gentle soundtrack that's very soothing. And as you unlock the various things, the various aircraft and other aviation related things, which are what contribute to your overall points to unlock the next thing, you get like little snippets of history about something. So in the first phase, you have like pre-flight era things like paper airplane, the paper lanterns, and things like that. And whenever you unlock something for the first time, you just get a little thing that pops up, and it's 2-3 sentences, just a very brief history about the thing and how it was used. And it's just really nice. Like, I learned a couple of little things, and there were a couple of interesting facts about stuff, and I was like, oh, well, I'll go look up more about that. And I just closed that app. I had spent all of my points anyways, so I couldn't buy anything else. I closed the app, went over to Wikipedia, and looked up a couple of things. The game you can't purchase anything in it. There's no store, there's no premium currency, there's no nothing. You can watch ads to get boosts. So like you watch a 30-second ad and then you get a 2-hour boost.
You mean you put down the phone for 30 seconds?
Yeah, you put down the phone for 30 seconds, get a drink, go to the bathroom, whatever. And then when you pick it back up again, you got a boost. And it's got like a little spinner wheel because it, I guess, has to have something. And you can get a 2 times boost, a 3 times boost, or a 4 times boost. Or you can watch an ad for a straight up 30 times boost, but that only lasts for 60 seconds. But otherwise, that's it. And honestly, there's really no reason to. You can get through the first set pretty easily. And there's no like penalty or anything to restarting. And every time you restart, you get a bonus, which is pretty common for this type of game, so that you earn resources faster. And relatively quickly, you can get to the point where that you can have enough of a bonus to do a reset, and then within like 2 minutes, you're back up to exactly where you were before, just earning faster towards the next one. And I've reset like 4 or 5 times at this point. I don't know how many eras they are. It starts with like pre-powered flight, and then there's what it calls the golden age of flight, which is like the around like the Wright Flyer. And then there's the space race, which covers some rocket,
yeah, it's kind of
like
odd
the
that
space
they call
shuttle
it
and some
Golden Age,
rocketry.
isn't it?
Yeah. But there's something beyond space race, so I don't know how far you can go. Like I see on the image on the Google Play Store, it says Galaxy. So
they go sci-fi?
I assume that would be sci-fi. But so far, everything has been historical. Like, it's got the first Falcon like the SpaceX Falcon rocket, whatever the first one
The
was.
Falcon 1.
Okay, yeah, the Falcon 1. There you go. It's got something about the Falcon 1. It's got a thing about the space shuttle. It talks about a few different satellites, some different like aircraft types and things like that. So it's just a cute little thing. Like I wasn't expecting it. I was honestly expecting like a bullshit clicker style game with just a really cute art style, because the art style is very cute. That was the thing that drew my eye in the first place. But I discovered that it was a really well put together sort of mini educational type tool. And I mean, they're going to be earnings. Yeah, they're going to be earning something off of the ad revenue, but I like the fact that there's no store, there's no premium currency.
Yet.
It's not trying to, I mean, yeah, yet. But it, you know, at least right now, it's not trying to steal all of the money out of my wallet. It's just like, hey, have some aircraft and some cuteness.
And some history.
And some history, yeah. So, there you go.
Yeah, I think
those are all the games that I played this week.
Yeah, and some of them you actually did play.
I did. I need to take a quick break.
Yeah, sounds good to me, so we'll meet back up here in a few minutes. But now the break's over.
Indeed. So, moving on to the Game Club for the month of May. In case you don't know, this is your first time tuning in, Rach and I have very different overall tastes in video games, and even the video games that we play at the same time, or have played together, we feel differently about them. So Game Club is a way for us to come together and make sure that we play the same game and can get a fully developed take on said game from both of our perspectives. And this one is super special because normally Game Club, the games that we play are older.
Yeah, usually a year or two old. But I realize it's kind of funny. We have differing tastes literally, 15, 20 minutes after talking about the same game together?
That's true. That happened. But both of us get games to review and things like that, so we just happen to have the same game that we played. But anyways, so yeah, this one's extra special because at time of recording, Battletech released roughly 1 month ago. So we both purchased this game brand new and have played it start to finish.
Yeah, I just did the campaign,
we're going to talk about
it. You did a little bit of multiplayer and the skirmish mode as well.
Yeah, and I did a lot of campaign. I played this game a ton. This game came at the perfect time for me to be able to like binge something that I really enjoy. Battletech is something that I love the universe in. I love the entirety of building big stompy mechs and customizing the shit out of them. I love turn-based strategy games, which is what this particular Battletech game is. There's a number of games in the series, which I might talk about just a tiny bit. But, so not only is this a game that I love, with mechanics that I love, set in a universe that I love, but I also was transitioning to a new job. So I had like 2.5, 3 weeks where I had nothing to do. Like my kid was in daycare. My wife specifically said, hey, before you go back to work, because I've been doing, up until that point, I was doing my own clinic after I lost my job in last October. She was like, hey, before you go back to work, just make sure you take some time for yourself because everything's going to change again. And I was like, okay, I'll do that. So I played Battletech. Like, it was the perfect storm for me to just binge something that I really enjoy.
Yeah, I thought I played a lot of this game, and then you have double my hours.
Yeah, I played Battletech over 200 hours. I'm going to look specifically at how much.
I ended up ending right over 100, and that's not by design because, there's some things this game does that I do not like.
Yeah, I played 204 hours as of recording. Most of that time was in the first 2 weeks after the game released. At least 2/3 of it probably in the first 2.5 weeks, and then it slowed down after that because
there was a couple
started going back to work.
There was a couple weeks there where you had done nothing else.
Specifically that first week, I think I played Battletech 50 or 60 hours the first week alone, and then I did that again the second week, and then
Meanwhile, I was managing everything else on the YouTube channel, so.
yeah. But anyways, enough about me binging something so much. But yeah, so let's just brief. So I actually put together some categories for this because this game covers a lot of different things.
Yeah, overall
and I figured
history with the franchise, your first topic. I don't have a lot. I just have a couple of the old MechWarrior games, and that's really been my only exposure. I've known about Battletech as a board game, but it was always too complex to be able to even consider as an offering for Stream Night whenever we were still doing that for Tabletop Sim, because I could only imagine how long that would take.
Yeah, depending on what type of game you're playing, can take anywhere from hours to weeks. Because you can play it as just like you set up a battle scenario, and that takes usually a couple of hours or so. Or you could do it more like a role play where you have a pilot or a group of pilots with skills and things that you manage. You have your mercenary company with mechs and vehicles and space stuff. Like, you can play a campaign for weeks, just like a D&D campaign or a Star Wars RPG or whatever, just in the Battletech universe. My history with Battletech is pretty expensive, expensive and expansive.
Had a Freudian slip there.
Indeed. I don't know how much money I've spent on those books over the years, but I've read a good chunk of the Battletech books. There's several dozen. I've read most of the Dark Ages series and most of the Clan Wars series, but the books span something like 2 to 3 decades worth of stories and writers and things. So, I've read a good chunk of them, but in total I've probably not even hit 50% of all the books that have been written. Plus there's all the source material that's in the rule books for the games. I've played what's known as Battletech Classic, the tabletop game, because there's like 3 different rule sets. Because the property changed hands a couple of times, and when it did, they were like, we're going to reinvent the wheel. But Battletech Classic is the original rule set, and that's the version of the tabletop that I've played. And then I've played the majority of the video games. I've played the 2 Mech Assault games, which are very sort of adjacent. Whatever Xbox studio it was that made those games, they didn't follow very much of the Battletech anything. So most people consider those like super apocryphal. I've played most of the MechWarrior games, going back to MechWarrior 2 and its expansions. I've not played the ones that were on Super Nintendo, or there was one that was on Windows 3.1, or it might have even been an MS-DOS game. I haven't played that one. But anything from MechWarrior 2 up, I've played all of those, all the sequels and expansions. And then I've played both Mech Commander games, which are real-time strategy games set in the Battletech universe. So I've got a pretty extensive history with the lore of this game. And even so, I still feel like I've only scratched the surface. The best way to describe Battletech to someone who's never really played it is to hope that they've seen Game of Thrones and then say, it's kind of like Game of Thrones, but with giant mechs. Because most of the story, at least the early story, centers around all of the major houses, which control huge chunks of the galaxy, constantly at war with each other and constantly going through political craziness and backstabbings and assassinations and poisonings and marriages for gaining of stature. The galaxy sort of went to this future feudalism society after there was some stuff that like everything broke down. So that's like a super vague, super in a nutshell overview of Battletech, the Battletech universe. It's fascinating.
Yeah, so Game of Thrones plus Usually 50 to 100 ton big stompy robots.
Yeah, what's not to love? Um, so yeah, that's my history of the franchise and just kind of a very general overview. Before we
Yeah,
went
mine
any
was very
farther,
truncated. I played MechWarrior a couple times.
yeah. Before we go any farther, did you have any questions or things that you thought were weird that maybe
Uh,
I could answer or help frame?
I I think the game does well enough explaining the general terms and everything else. I wish that there was just an encyclopedia in game with all the tooltips that it offers in its dialogue. But
Yeah, I really liked that, but I do wish they had an in-game
yeah,
encyclopedia.
that unlocked as you saw new terms. But
Yeah.
I think I got the gist of everything. It's just more. This is actually a very small story overall. It's just about one very small kingdom, essentially, for lack of a better
Yeah.
term.
Yeah.
So it's a nicely compacted story. That said, let's just jump ahead to story discussion, skip mechanics for the time being, since we have a good
Sure.
entry into this. I felt
That's fine.
I felt the story was a little too simple, that it was played out kind of in the background, behind the scenes, and never was really in the forefront, with the exception of a couple missions that you were just there and that was it.
Yeah.
Which
So
isn't a bad thing if they didn't keep talking about how you were the linchpin, that you saved everything.
yeah, in some ways they did the story really well, lining it up with how things sort of have worked in the Battletech universe, and in some ways they did a poor job of it.
I think it's a bad way of doing story gameplay segregation. That's where it really broke down for me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the problem. If you had spent a huge, or maybe not huge, but a much more connected chunks of the game dealing with the story missions, it would be much better off. Because what happens, dear listener, is you will do a story mission, sometimes two story missions, close together, and then the game will say, okay,
We need to go
just do
rally
a bunch
forces.
of random side missions while we go do something else, and then we'll let you know when we're ready for the next story mission. And in some ways that's nice, because the game doesn't pressure you really to do the story, aside from at the very beginning, which if you're not playing with mods, it's next to impossible to really wait out those first couple of story missions. But once you pass a point in the game where you get your big drop ship called the Argo,
We should have said
then you
spoilers,
can,
by the way, for the game.
yeah, fair, yeah, we spoil everything. But once you get the Argo, the game opens up, and it becomes much easier to actually sustain yourself on those in-between bits. So, but yeah, the game is just like, all right, go do whatever for sometimes many hours of gameplay. Sometimes it's just like one or two missions, which works out to be anywhere between 30 minutes to an hour, depending on how quickly your computer can load the missions, which it goes to the technical side, but we'll get to there too. And then how long it actually takes you to complete them. But most of the missions are relatively short once you get the handle on it. I was averaging up until the end, where I basically just learned how to exploit the AI. I was averaging like 20 to 30 minutes a mission.
Yeah, some of the missions do drag on, though, particularly towards the end.
Yeah.
And that's not even pure length in the mission. It's more that the game likes to waste your time. It feels like usually more in outside of missions, though. But in the missions as well, that you're always waiting for enemy movements, even if they're not on screen.
Yeah, the biggest complaint that I've seen people levy against the game has been how slow it is.
And it's not, the good chunky kind of slow where you have a certain weight to the movement and everything. It's more that even if an enemy is off screen, you have to wait for its entire movement animation to play out. Which it shouldn't have to. That should just be off screen. That should be behind the scenes. And that really spoils, some things, that, the way the game handles things is that each turn has 5 initiative phases. from 5 to 1, and the lighter, usually, the lighter class mechs move first. So light mechs would move in turn 5 or 4. Well, the lighter class, I should say, not light class. And as you go through the phases, you get usually heavier and heavier stuff, with vehicles for the AI usually turning up in phase 1 through 3. So
yeah, vehicles go in one initiative phase lower than their weight class.
yeah, so if you end up, there's a noticeable pause, and the enemy is having an enemy turn, and you don't see any movement on a low phase, it ruins the surprise that, oh, there's something out there, which is irritating, particularly because the AI, it does decent enough overall, but then it does stupid shit where it just doesn't value its own survival.
Yeah.
Like, it'll do a death from above, which is, fire up its jump jets, jump on something, and doing that move is heavy damage, but it also damages your mech as well, to the legs. And if a mech loses both of its legs, it's incapacitated. And it'll do that whenever it's already heavily damaged, which, sometimes it's a desperation move. But I've had mechs do that to me and blow out a perfectly good leg and open up their back to me for back shots, which the back armor on a mech is a lot weaker than the front armor. And it makes no tactical sense whatsoever.
Yeah, the way that mechs are set up, each limb has got what's called an internal structure rating, which is basically like the health of that body part. And then there's armor that can be placed on top, and you can place up to double the structure length on each limb or body part, except for the back, and you can only match the back's rating. So, if a body part, like, okay, the right torso of a mech, say it's got a structural rating of 90. On the front, you could place 180 armor, but on the back, you could only place 90 armor. And that's if you maxed out your armor. 9 times out of 10, you are not going to max out your armor because, well, armor is heavy. And then you want to put more guns or heat sinks so that your mech doesn't melt, or other things on there.
So whenever the AI does stupid shit and opens itself up, it feels very artificial.
Yeah, that's when I'm talking about exploiting the AI, learning how to get the AI to chase down certain mechs so that you can basically pull aggro on them when you shouldn't really be able to do that. Like,
see, I was trying to avoid even learning how to do that and just approaching it as human-esque player.
Yeah, I did that for a long time, but now I'm trying to. Eventually, I'd like to 100% the game, get all the achievements. I don't know if I'd ever get all the multiplayer ones. Some of those are going to be difficult. And as this type of game goes on and the player base gets smaller and smaller over time,
the hardcore
the people
players
who are left are going to be the hardcore players, and there's going to be no way I can compete with those guys.
At least with that attitude.
At least for the single player and the skirmish stuff, I'd like to get all the achievements. And in order to speed up the process, I started exploiting the AI to make battles easier. Occasionally, I'll challenge myself. Like, I'll purposefully take... Like, one night we were just chatting while we were playing, and I was like, I'm taking an entire lance of light mechs, which a lance is 4 mechs. That's the most you can take into combat. Into a mission that is rated to be, like, probably going to have mostly heavies. So the missions have a skull rating. You can have a half skull all the way up to 5 skulls. And that just gives you a rough idea of essentially the type of mechs you're going to be fighting. There's little modifiers that your XO gives you. Then he'll like give you a hint that a mission might be easier or harder than its skull rating.
And usually he's wrong.
Usually he's wrong, yeah. But I purposely took 4 light mechs into a mission that was mostly heavy mechs, just to challenge myself, and I won barely. Like, I had 2 mechs, 2 of my own mechs were completely destroyed. Somehow I managed to eject one of my pilots, and the other one miraculously lived. I had one mech that was limping, And then I had one mech that was fine because it was set up as a sniper build, so he was never in close combat with any of the heavy mechs. But let's see, we were talking about story, and then we got off onto, and I mean, this is how this is going to go. We'll try and stick to what we were talking about.
There is a story, but the meat of the game really is in its mechanics and in its random generation of missions.
Yeah, I really like the story, but it gets at least, 25% of its credit from me because it's adding to the overall Battletech lore. And it's one of those things, it's like, you don't need to know all of the stuff that I know to get what's going on in the story, but you can see like little Easter eggs or little
hints of
nods towards stuff.
Nods to the old school lore or things that are coming up in the overall story.
Yeah,
of the universe,
and so,
I should say, not this individual little story.
Yeah,
it just
and so I'm like, oh, there's that place or there's that thing or that person, and that's really nice. The story itself, I thought was still pretty decent.
Yeah, I thought it was decent enough. I think my biggest problem with it overall, outside of the segregation of story gameplay mechanics, where they talk about you being such a key part, but honestly, you never really take place of any of the major battles. You're always the distraction.
Yeah, you're always either a distraction, or there's a couple missions where you're like doing sort of a spec ops
strike. But it's also anticlimactic, where at the end of everything, the intel that another character did off screen essentially turns the tide of the war, and he gives up. The big bad, and you have this final duel with the cousin of the Lady Camellia.
Yeah,
you fight her,
Lady Kamala.
You fight her cousin Victoria as the final mission of the story, and a 4v4 battle essentially. And it feels highly anticlimactic. And even the mission before that, because you have this point of no return, and it's this big, you better be ready to field multiple lances. Even the mission before that, where you're uploading this virus to this dropship that's incoming because you pissed off this local lord by killing his son in a previous mission, felt like it was just handled kind of, so that's a thing. I would have loved to actually had a more direct confrontation with him.
Yeah, I thought he was gonna be the main boss.
I actually forgot about him for a long time because he has this big cutscene. This isn't over, and then you don't see him for like 30 or 40 hours.
Well, you hear from another character like once you turn in the evidence that basically turns the tide of the war. You hear like, oh, we're gonna recall him immediately, and it's like, okay, I guess he's not coming back. But then, like, you see him again in, like, the pre-mission cutscene and everything, and I'm like,
rogue.
Yeah, he went rogue. So I was like, okay, cool. He's going to be, like, the big boss that you fight. And then you kill him by doing the mission and uploading that virus, and his ship slams into the planet and blows up.
You don't even directly confront him, ever.
So I was let down by the ending in a storytelling perspective. But this is one of those things where my knowledge of the universe or whatever, my previous experience allowed me to like it a bit more. Because during the time that this game is set, mech warriors are considered sort of like knights were in the medieval era. And so lots of battles to determine the fates of sometimes entire worlds would be fought by these knights in arenas. And so that made me think like, okay, like we're sort of having this final showdown as a gladiator match, or, as like these.
Yeah, maybe that's just
these
where
knights.
I don't have the history of the universe. So, encountering that felt like a bigger letdown to me because of it, because I don't know the significance of it. So I'll give you that.
Yeah, and I mean, that's
going
fair.
Into
like
that, as someone that never read the books, only have a passing knowledge of the MechWarrior and by extension Battletech franchise by playing I would say 2 or 3 MechWarrior games in the late 90s, early 2000s, it felt like a huge disappointment.
Yeah. And like I said, I was still let down overall by the ending, but I still got a little bit of a,
But
this
it
is
also
neat.
has the sequel hook.
Yeah.
The DLC hook, I guess I should say, because they are going to expand it through DLC, story DLC. So, there is that, but still I was wanting more. I was wanting that fight with, hell, I can't even think of his name, the guy with the red hair. It looks like Angry Jesus.
Yeah. Oh, although to be honest, I can't think of his name either. So,
well, he was just a side character that you highly pissed off. That I was expecting, if not to be the big bad at the end, to be some sort of driving force.
I want to say Colonel Renard, but I know that that's wrong because that's the main boss bad guy from Mech Commander 2. But for some reason in my head, they're very similar characters in the way that they present themselves. Angry, you wronged them at some point in the story and they're going to get you. But at the end of Mech Commander 2, you actually fight Colonel Renard and have to kill him. So,
yeah, and this you just upload a virus that you happened upon earlier and that was even mentioned once again for ages. It just like I said, it left me wanting.
Yeah.
Maybe if the scope of the battles were a bit bigger, which granted, I don't know how they'd be able to do that because the game runs a bit rough.
Yeah, the game has got
it has
some
FPS hitches. It has times where it has to sit down and think about it for a bit. Which, if the AI handled battles a bit better, I'd be fine with. But it does stupid shit.
Its load times are abysmal.
Yeah,
even on my SSD.
Yeah, I swapped it over to SSD, and it still takes ages to load.
Yeah, it takes about as long to load on my SSD as I would expect it to load on my hard drive or my hard disk. So, I don't know what's up with that. They've said that a lot of the performance. No, let's see, what was it I read? It wasn't Harebrained Schemes that said this. It was one of the modders. It uses the GPU to do all of the menu rendering or something, and the way that it loads things slows it down because it's not properly utilizing your CPU.
Yeah.
Like it only uses like 2 cores or something like that, whereas the game could benefit from using more than 2 cores.
Yeah, and for how the game runs and looks, it's definitely rough. It definitely could have used optimization pass or 2.
Yeah, they've the first 2 patches they released were optimization and bug fixes, and it still has issues. I have noticed after the most recent big patch that I'm not suffering from what appears to be a memory leak. It feels like it felt like the KSP issue where every time you would change a menu, the game would slow down.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like it's doing that anymore, but also since the patch came out, I haven't played for long. Oh no, that's not true. For Memorial Day, I played it for several hours, and I didn't have to restart the game at all.
Yeah, I've noticed that there's fewer big FPS hitches.
Yeah,
but for as rough as it runs, I would expect it to look a lot prettier. Not to say that it's an ugly game, but it's adequate. Maybe I'm being a little bit more judgmental on the game because several times the camera gives you a really, really good look at a rock. Yeah, this game has the usual XCOM-esque woes with the camera. Oh, where occasionally, there's, interesting fighting, but let's look at the side of a mountain.
Let's look at the rock, or let's look underneath the ground. And you can't actually truly turn off.
Yeah, you can make it very
stuff.
rare, but it still happens very often because there's so many turns. Yeah. Because each, each phase of each turn of the battle is 5 phases, and each turn is or each movement is essentially its own turn, and
Yeah, and you've got 4 mechs, and the opposing side usually has 8 mechs, plus occasionally some vehicles, plus turrets. And the campaign missions can have as many as like 25 or 30 units in them at a time that each get their own individual turn.
yeah.
So, I don't mind specifically the speed of combat. Battletech and MechWarrior have always been slower games because the mechs are big, slow, stompy mechs, not Japanese mecha.
It's mech, not mecha.
But, with all of the game hitches and staring at rocks and trees and things, that can definitely get old quick.
Yeah, and all the fucking cutscenes during travel, and as much as you have to travel as well in the unmodded game, where each planet has usually 2 or 3 missions at best, sometimes even just 1. And if you get a mission where you have a Kobayashi Maru, where it's essentially a no-win scenario with your current build, which does happen, which I don't have as much of a problem with, because you could withdraw at pretty much any point whenever it's your turn, or whenever a mech is severely damaged, you could eject the pilot. It destroys the head and anything that's equipped to the head slot, but allows you to essentially, if a mech is badly damaged enough and you have irreplaceable parts on it, you could save it by just ejecting. I don't have as much a problem with that. It's just, okay, I just traveled here. I tried to do the mission. It's, it's a 2 or 3 skull, but it's more of like a 4 or 5 because of just the stuff they're throwing at me. Plus, they just happen to summon random reinforcements that just spawned behind me and completely screwed me over. So now I have another 2 weeks of travel, and oh look, I get to watch all the cutscenes again.
Yeah. Yep. Modding the game helps with that some. The mods that I'm using remove the story. What are they called?
Milestones.
The milestones in the story, which forcibly upgrade all of the missions that you're at. So you could actually, by doing the story too quickly, you can make it to where that you're just fucked, because the missions grow in difficulty with each of the story missions. So I use a mod that removes that and then rebalances some of the difficulties of the planets so that you still have some high difficulty missions to go to. But what it does is you have like a mercenary board rating that just grows as you complete missions, and the difficulty is more based off of that than your campaign progress. But that's one mod that I use, and then the other mod that I use changes the variance and the difficulty, or changes the variance of missions and how many missions there are on each planet, and you can set it yourself. So I actually set it to 15 missions per planet.
Oh, that must take so long for the initial load whenever it renders everything.
Yeah, it does take a little bit of time, but it's 15 missions per planet with a variance rating of 3, which means that you can have anywhere from
a skull and a half below to a skull and a half above.
Yeah. So.
Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah, I did that, not to that extreme, but the way that they handled the game in the base, it's, I would say, pretty much a requirement, because it's very, very, very difficult to be able to balance everything otherwise. It's not impossible, but I just couldn't take watching the jump screens anymore.
Yeah, that's not... I got past that one. I don't know. I don't have a problem with it. I like the soundtrack, and it's very pretty. And I also went around
to listen to a lot more podcasts and turn down the soundtrack because just was spending so much time traveling, which is a shame because the soundtrack is very good. But
yeah, I've been listening to the soundtrack on repeat at work, like every day. It's an excellent soundtrack. It's almost entirely what's the word I'm looking for? Orchestral.
With a little bit of a chorus every so often.
Yeah. The I don't know if he was just
my favorite thing is actually the cutscenes though. The art style that they went with, this painted style,
Yeah.
is just absolutely fucking beautiful.
Yeah,
And that's also the few times that they actually have voice work. The game is, for the most part, actually unvoiced, which the reason for that is that they have a lot of customization on your player character, and they'll occasionally just call you by your first name, or then call you by your call sign, or call you by your full name. And they couldn't do that otherwise. So I understand why they did it, but still, it kind of takes you out of it, or at least it took me out of it whenever there's this long segment of, okay, he's talking, she's talking, he's talking, oh, this other person's talking, and there's no voice work whatsoever.
Yeah. It's some of those campaign cutscene images, I'm going to get a couple of those. I'm going to go through and pick out which ones I like the best, but I'm going to get a couple of those actually printed to canvases to hang up in my office. They're gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, with some limited animation on them, but they do it really well. Either limited animation or it's all in the particle effects, smoke or fire, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Just absolutely excellent work on that. I would say that's the most graphically impressive part of the game. The on the ship stuff is decent enough. It honestly feels very StarCraft-ish, doesn't it? Where you're going around talking to the individual people and asking their story, that sort of thing. But it's all broken up into individual portions and that sort of thing. And, it feels like StarCraft 2 and how they handled it, which, isn't wrong. But, it's just the cutscenes blow everything else away graphically. But you can tell that they spent a lot of time with that.
Definitely. I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, well.
Well, you were going to mention that the composer tweeted you.
Oh, yeah, that's right. The composer tweeted at me after I said that I've been listening to it at work a lot. And I was like, well, that's neat. He did good work. Let's see. What else? There are many.
Yeah.
There's still many things.
Yeah, we're still on the sort of the mechanics of things where I would say the thing that pisses me off most mechanically is the random difficulty spikes, but more the difficulty spikes that you have no control over, particularly whenever they spawn reinforcements, which they do it way too fucking often. There was a string of missions where I would say 4 or 5 times I got reinforcements, and it was always whenever you started to familiarize yourself with the battle maps, you're like, okay, it's this map, so if they spawn reinforcements, it's going to be over here. Oh, look, it's reinforcements from over here. But then they would throw a wrench, and occasionally there was reinforcements. There was one time that I randomly, on the second turn, had a mech shot in the back and an arm blown off by reinforcements spawning right on top of me. I was not pleased.
Yeah.
I do not how they handle the reinforcements at all. But the maps are too small, I think, to really handle that properly.
Yeah.
Because some of them are just microscopic. There's probably the worst one for reinforcements is some of the polar ones are mostly just a basin in between 2 mountain ranges with a couple of entrances.
Yeah.
Or there's another one that's a valley with a mountain in the middle of it, and some forest around it, which it's just irritating that, okay, this mission looks decent. Oh, fuck, more reinforcements. And I love how the XO always says, Commander, we're getting a signal of reinforcements as they're shooting me.
Yeah. Sometimes though, if you kill reinforcements first, when you finish, it'll be like, oh, there's reinforcements coming in, but then it'll be like, you killed everyone already.
Yeah, I loved it. There was more than a few missions where the reinforcements were intermixed with the actual objective. So I would kill the last objective just by chance, and hey, we got reinforced, and then mission successful.
Yeah. The random missions definitely can get old.
Yeah, I would
very
say,
repetitive.
I would say that the game does tend to get very samey. Maybe it's just because and I'm not sure if this is just because lore, but it keeps throwing the same type and same variants of mechs at you constantly. With occasionally there's that little spice of life, but somebody's fucking thunderbolts, for example.
Well, that has to do partially with the area of space that you're in. I discovered this later on after I looked up a table that had a lot of stuff in it because I'm trying to find specific mechs to complete I think it's called like the full stable or something like that, where you have at least one of every mech variant in the game. And there are certain mechs both that you fight and can acquire like via the store that only spawn in certain systems, or not systems, certain areas of space.
Yeah, which the game limits you to, I would say, about half the map for the entire campaign.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird how they have this huge map and they only use a small portion of it, but then again, ties into this as a very small story.
Yeah. And I mean, this is even the overall map, which is pretty large, is only a tiny portion of the actual Battletech map. So, that's somewhere that they can obviously go with expansions.
Yeah, I understand that's why they did it like that, but I was expecting to see the map open up before the actual ending, or have it utilized in some way, but no, it's just there.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of so we haven't really talked about the random events that you can find.
Yeah.
And the game definitely needs more.
Oh, I got the burger event so many fucking times.
But there are actually a lot of random events because each system has got modifiers to it, like rich, trading hub, former Comstar former Star League presence, Comstar presence. There's a bunch of modifiers. And certain events are either more likely to trigger or only exclusively trigger on planets with certain modifiers. So there's a decent amount of them, and there's like you'll find random events that have a solution that's grayed out, and even when you have like a fully upgraded ship, and you're like, how do I get this solution? Well, you do go to a planetary system that has the right modifier, get the event, and then do the, I guess, proper outcome or the outcome that gives you that option. Like there's one where that you'll constantly, or not constantly, but you have a random chance to run into ships that the people have got some sort of plague, and you can do nothing. You can sell them medical supplies or give them medical supplies, or you can give them some of the like special medical supplies. It's like pox antivirals or something. Supplies, motherfucker.
Well, I was going more UHF on that.
I got you. But that give pox antivirals is grayed out until you go through a mission or a random event chain where you actually catch the pox on your ship, and then you have to get the medical supplies like the special pox antivirals, and then you also have to get extra ones. Like you can buy extra ones or steal them, or if you have a high enough reputation with the planetary government, you can get extra ones. And then you have the extra ones, and then you can give them out to other ships. And in doing so, you can actually remove the pox plague from planetary systems. There's one where that you can, like, pirates attack your ship. And if you go to a world that has, like, a pirate base and you wait around long enough, eventually there's a event you can find where that you can actually join up with the pirates. And then you can accept a pirate contract, and then in doing so you become liked by the pirates, and so anywhere you go then you can click on the button that's like friendly with the pirates, And you can be like, no, I'm a pirate too. I worked with so and so. And they're like, okay, awesome. And then you can get some random things from that. Like sometimes they'll give you
I still
money
think
or
it's
tech.
funnier to prep the drop ship to be able to fire on him. And he says, no. The last number is 0, not O. Nobody uses O in an account number.
Yeah,
There's little bits
that
of
is.
humor here and there. Like whenever you first meet the ship engineer, not Yang, but the other one, the lady. And
Yeah.
Yang, this guy, this big tough guy with a robotic arm, he says, "Well, Doc, by the way, I'm gonna call you Doc. I hope you're okay with that," or something like that.
Yeah, I think it's like get used to it
get
or
used
something
to
like that is what he says.
Just little bits of humor here and there, and that's also interspersed throughout the random events.
Yeah.
So some of them, I kind of don't want to get rid of because of that. Like probably the best one that I encountered was the 0G pool, which
Yeah, the 0G pool is one of the best ones.
We both did different outcomes to it. You
Yeah,
said
so
nothing, didn't you?
yeah, so one of the upgrades you can get to your ship, which gives you a morale boost, is you can put a pool in. And there's a random event that can happen where
people go skinny dipping.
People go skinny dipping, and it's like you see it on camera, and the two choices are like you say something about it or you don't. And I picked don't say anything about it because it's like they're all adults. I'd rather them blow off steam this way than getting into another fight in the
And what was the outcome
mech
of
bay
that?
or something like that. There's nothing. There's no lasting consequences.
Okay, for me, I got on the intercom and said, essentially, please note that proper swim attire in the pool is a requirement. And just to note, there's a camera in the hallway outside the pool. And then throughout the air ducts, you just hear this screeching, "Oh my God!" And I got 2 morale for it.
Nice. Yeah, I figured if you did that, you would lose morale.
I thought, what the hell? Because Yang was like, I don't know if I could look at these people in the same way.
Yeah, I'm at the point where like my morale is at 50.
Yeah, I'm in the low 40s, so I figured, what the hell?
Yeah, I don't.
But I guess people thought it was funny.
Yeah. There's some other random events too that even though they repeat, they have different potential outcomes. Like there's regular poker night, and you have different choices for poker night, and there are multiple random outcomes for each choice that you make. So you can like play casually or play to win, and you'll get a different flavor text and then potential different things. Like normally you just get like 1 or 2 morale, but sometimes like if you play casually. And Yang does really good. You might get a bonus to
tech points.
Your tech points, which is how quickly you can repair and modify mechs. So that's nice.
Yeah, or people may get high spirits or low spirits based on events, which affects how the morale is spent in battle, which we haven't mentioned because as you build morale outside of the battles, it's brought into the battle as well to a maximum of 50 points. And you're able to spend those points on 2 abilities, either Vigilance, which gives your mech a lot more tanky abilities. I think it's half damage. And it removes all stability damage, which is the ability to knock over the mech. But it doesn't stack with cover. And cover is actually not really a requirement to use all the time. And in the beginning of the game, I think I really hurt myself by playing more XCOM-like and trying to stick to cover. But the other one is being able to spend it to use a cold shot, which boosts your accuracy, but also allows you to target a certain component or a certain section of the mech to either disable it or kill it outright. So if a pilot is really skilled, I believe, with tactics, they get a cold shot bonus, so they are able to hit a particular area of a mech a lot easier. And, if you shoot off the head of a mech, it's dead. And you get all the salvage of the mech. You get 3 components, which allows you to build the mech outright.
Yep.
But let's see. Well, uh, anything else on mechanics, or should I just go down my bitch list?
I don't think so. You can start going down your list.
Okay. How about well, something that kind of irked me was that it seems like the game didn't really give enough info for me to sometimes make smart decisions, particularly in loadout in the mech base, mostly on heat generation. It doesn't tell you exactly how much heat generation or how much heat you dissipate without just getting enough time to get a feel for it. And that could sometimes come to bite me in the ass, like the default stalker mech, or I should say the modified stalker I was using. It couldn't even alpha strike without overheating.
Yeah.
And it's just because I didn't have enough info. Also, just by extension of that, there's not a lot of customization on the mechs themselves outside of just weapons and a couple of upgrades, which are very samey. You have cockpit upgrades, which is either morale or injury resistance. You have arm upgrades, which is damage to melee attacks. And you have leg upgrades, which is it's death from above plus damage or resistance, and then targeting computers. Oh, and there's the gyros. But they use up so much room that for a good chunk of the mechs, you are either sacrificing weapon slots or you could only use one. It starts to feel very samey, I guess. Particularly just with the low variance of mechs, but maybe it's just because I was still tied to the campaign area.
Yeah, you start seeing a larger variety once you go out, and you see particularly different default loadouts, which really helps.
Yeah, maybe it's just because the computer always uses the default loadout for that variant. So, being tied to a small area space and seeing, oh, it's another fucking Wolverine. Oh, look, it's Lotus again. Or Locust.
Yeah.
It gets very old. You see the tonnage you see, well, that was obviously a long-range missile 15 salvo. So that's either a Jaeger mech, a Thunderbolt, or a catapult. Most likely.
Yeah. That's part of the fun to me too, though, is like being able to pick out like exactly what I'm gonna be fighting based on tonnage, and then like you see them attack you from out of visual range. It's like, oh, so you can narrow it down even farther. I mean, I could see how that would be annoying and frustrating, but I find that
maybe if there was just
fun.
more variants, or the computer actually made use of all the plus weapons, where okay, that mech has LRM 15s plus. So, okay, that's going to be a lot more dangerous. I need to worry about that mech more than I otherwise would. Because I never saw an enemy mech use any of the additional equipment. I never saw him use plus weapons, unless that's just behind the scenes. It's just, it's the same mechs.
I don't think any of them use the melee enhancements or anything like that. Those are more player driven. And they have a chance to drop plus weapons, but I don't know if they actually use them. I've never seen one when looking at the chart, like the weapons chart, but I kind of just got to the point where it's like I know every weapon that's on every loadout, and it's like, okay, I don't even need to check this anymore. I know exactly where the ammo is. I'm going to shoot at that specific place when using my called shot.
Oh, look, it's a hunchback. Time to shoot in the shoulder.
Yeah, time to destroy its right shoulder. But, yeah, they do get more variants once you're in other places, which is nice.
Yeah, I just wish that was tied into the main campaign, or in the area space where the main campaign takes place, because I would say it's about a third of the map, a quarter.
Yeah, it's a big chunk in the middle. You have all of the unaffiliated planets, and then you unlock the Tauran Concordance area before you finish the campaign. So somewhere between a quarter and a third initially, and then maybe closer to half by the end of the campaign.
But let's see, something else on my bitch list. Well, I have the random difficulty spikes, but we already talked about that essentially. Even though sometimes that kind of works out for me. I mean, that's how I got my first full assault mech that the game just doesn't give to you. Which I'm not sure how I feel about it giving you essentially the super weapons. Because it almost feels kind of cheaty after a while.
You mean the Lost Tech
Yeah.
weapons? Because you get the Gauss rifle, and then at the end of the game, when you get the Atlas, you get the medium pulse lasers and the ER large lasers. Yeah, honestly, like if the plus weapons didn't exist, those would be much more viable. But with you being able to get pulse weapons, or not pulse weapons, plus weapons, those become a lot less useful. Like I've got almost an entire weapons, inventory full of plus and plus weapons at this point. And I keep
going to the point of return, or what I was suspecting was the point of no return, which it was. I outfitted pretty much every one of my main loadout plus any additional spares I thought I would use with all plus weapons.
Yeah.
Yeah, the mech bay was busy. But yeah, there's just this huge power jump, and that's also the point where the game, where the main campaign feels like it loses a lot of its punch. That one mission where you're running all the assaults, that's not your company, it's the people that you left behind.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of the point where the difficulty curve just drops off for the most part. The mission where I had to disable the 3 generators right at the end. That was a little dicey, but that was more that I took a couple of assault mechs, so my company was moving slower than it should. But even then, I took my Highlander that had it was the one with the Gauss rifle, and I've outfitted it with pretty much as heavy a weaponry as I could, all plus weapons. And I just sprinted it for 3 turns up to one of the generators, while the entire other company went to the other.
Yeah. I nearly lost that mission the first time because both mechs that I brought with high mobility got legged. So they were limpy. And so I almost ran out of time. I got that one on the very last last
I got
turn.
on the last turn mostly just because I brought 2 slower mechs. And also the game doesn't give you a good indication of where you can jump and where you can move to very easily. So even though the Highlanders are able to do pretty big jumps, there was places where it looked like I should be able to jump up the cliffside, but I couldn't.
Yeah.
That's also a huge irritation. It's just that it doesn't give that information very easily. And whenever you're running a mech that doesn't have jump jets at all, and you have to rely on the actual terrain, there's a few times that it'll path you. You just click out towards, and it'll path you towards that way. But then it'll get confused and take you in a different way and take you towards a cliff. That happened to me a couple times after a mission. One of the few times that I had to go to the landing zone after a mission. Thankfully, it was outside of combat, so my hunchback was able to just hoof it. But it still was irritating. There should be some sort of indicator on the ground. I mean, they do indicators for the landing ships whenever they're going to surprise you with the landing ship. Oh, don't stand there. It's going to drop on you.
Yep, and it'll blow your mech up and kill your pilot.
But speaking of mobility, the light mechs, for me, just felt fucking useless after a while. Or close to useless, I should say.
Yeah, the light mechs are a lot better than I initially felt. You have to learn how to play them properly against heavy mechs. You A light mech that doesn't have jump jets is practically useless. Um, and even some of them with jump jets are also useless. The best light mechs in the game. Well, actually, let me step back a second. One thing that I really like about this game from a mech building and designing standpoint is that it actually takes into account the fact that mechs are designed for certain things. And so sometimes a 45-ton mech can outperform a 55-ton mech at a specific task because that's what it's been built for. So it might have better internal heat sinks, which like each mech has an internal heat sink system inside the reactor. And so some mechs have got better ones of those. So you could actually put more firepower on a smaller chassis because you don't have to load it up with 10 extra heat sinks so that it doesn't melt.
What I was talking about, where it doesn't show you the heat generation properly. It's
right.
just a bar.
But in doing that, like having mechs that are specifically good for certain tasks, the light mechs in particular really benefit from this. So for example, the Commando, which is a 25-ton mech, can mount more firepower than almost any other light mech. The specifically the one that uses that has like 3 missile hardpoints on it, because you can put multiple SRM-6s, which are the biggest short-range missile launchers in the game at this point, on it, which have they're a weapon that sort of punches above their weight class. They weigh 3 tons, but can put out as much firepower as the much heavier autocannons or PPCs. So you can have a light mech that can do over 150 damage with plus weapons later on in the game on a 25-ton chassis, and you put, I think the max is 6 heat sinks on it. You can get 5 evasion every turn, and you've got like a little jumping bean of death that can hop behind heavy and assault mechs and blow them up in a couple of turns. And you do have to rely on sort of the randomness of evasion to not be hit.
I think that's why I didn't like it, is that
the tankiness.
The game throws so many weapons at times that even low hit chance eventually gets a hit in, and as you get shot at, you lose evasion.
Yeah. Which that's one of the big, there are a few deviations from the tabletop, which this is mostly what it goes by, that I assume they did for gameplay balance reasons, but that still don't quite make any sense. You don't lose evasion in the tabletop game, which makes light mechs a lot more viable because they can't.
Well, while you're talking about the tabletop,
you can still,
I need to step away for just a moment.
Okay. You can still gang up on the lighter mechs in the tabletop, but because their evasion isn't stripped every time they're shot at, they maintain a higher difficulty to hit, which means that they have a much higher survivability rate, which means that they're much more viable in the tabletop game. Plus, I should wait for Rage to come back for this to talk about weapon loadouts.
Okay, sorry about that. I had to eject there for a moment.
Another thing that makes lighter mechs more useful, well, that just works differently in the tabletop, and that makes the default loadouts make a lot more sense, is the way that heat works, and the way that weapon ranges work. Yeah, so in the tabletop version, to sort of compare the heat system to what they did with the heat bar, when you start to get around the 25% point, you start taking penalties because parts are at various parts on your mech are starting to overheat, and while the overall heat is fine, that it's not going to melt or blow up your ammo, you might have to take a movement penalty and walk slower so you generate less heat, or you'll take an accuracy penalty because moving your arms too much to aim will generate heat. And the farther you go up that, you start taking internal systems damage much sooner. And then on top of that, you can blow up your ammo if you overheat too much.
Yeah, on this it's very binary. Up until a point, you take no penalties as far as I could tell. Then you start taking structural damage, then the mech will just shut down, and then it'll you have to restart it on that mech's next turn, and until that point, they could get called shots on it. Which
it's just like they're knocked down.
Yeah, which that makes fire starters actually one of the more dangerous light mechs if they get the drop on you.
Right. But so that heat management means that mechs have to have a much wider array of weapons, because you're going to be doing a lot less alpha strikes. So you need to stagger fire on enemies so that, one, specific weapons or parts don't overheat, and two, you can't rely on that overwhelming knockdown power of an alpha strike. So
alpha strikes so much in this game, actually.
Yeah, that's why mechs, like so many mechs, have like one LRM-5 or one LRM-10, so that they can be firing at range
while they close in.
While they close in, and ranges are much larger in the tabletop too.
Do you think this game would have done a lot better if the map size was just, let's say, double?
Yes, I think so, because you'd get more time before the AI just bum rushes your position. The map sizes are fine for multiplayer because you're dealing
4v4.
with a 4v4 human intelligence.
Yeah,
So,
but whenever the computer throws, 8 in this little valley, there was no way I was going to deal with that. It was the map was the valley, and it was 4 heavies and 4 assaults.
Yeah. I mean, multiplayer is a whole different animal. Since I brought it up, it will only take me a couple minutes to cover this. Because you're dealing with other human players, it's just a whole different ballgame. I tend to play very specialized mechs in the campaign. And while there's some specialization that can be useful in multiplayer, in general, you want to play it more like the tabletop, where you have various weapons that can engage at various ranges, because human players are going to try and kite around you. And for the most part, they're not just going to charge in every time. You're going to be dealing with a lot more armor, so being able to strip armor is a lot more useful than it is necessarily in the campaign. I mean, it's good to strip armor, period, because, that's how you work down your opponents to kill them. But human players, in my experience, tend to max out their armor so that they max out their survivability. Only, like a specialty like long-range mech is going to strip out its armor for more weapons and ammo. So, just the human factor makes all of these systems shine a lot more and actually play a lot closer to the tabletop game. There's still the stuff to deal with heat that works differently, and a few other things with the way that pilot skills work. But
yeah, we never even mentioned pilot skills.
No, you mentioned them earlier with the morale system.
Oh, well, that's the morale is not the individual pilots.
Oh, okay. Well, and also the multiplayer pilots, you've got like a random assortment that have various skills and various things, and you can't do anything with the pilots except assign them to a mech for your lance for multiplayer. But the full customization options are there. There's no plus weapons in multiplayer, and most of the special, like the cockpit mods, aren't there and stuff like that. But otherwise, you have access to the full range of weapons and mechs.
Yeah, since we mentioned it now, as the pilots go on missions, they get experience and they level up, which increases all their stats in 4 different areas. And at I want to say the 5 and the 7 or 5 and 8 range, they're able to get a special ability. And you're able to get 3 abilities overall, 2 from one and 1 from a second. Essentially stat, and all the others are unavailable to you, which allows for some interesting specialization for various pilots. Like a long-range mech may want bulwark, so that they could just sit and constantly pelt while not having to worry about also being in cover. Or
bulwark mean if you don't move, you get the guarded bonus, which is if you take 50%, only take 50% damage, and you only take 50% stability damage.
Yes. And multi-shot is also very important, where you can shoot up to 3 targets, I believe, and each individual weapon could be selected for a particular target. So if you have, let's say, a mech that has decent direct line weapons, let's say just medium lasers, because that's seems to be the bread and butter for most of my loadouts are medium lasers.
Yeah, that's pretty much classic Battletech.
Yeah.
Medium laser is the standard.
Yeah, let's say
weapon.
I have medium lasers with a pod of LRMs as well, and my pilot has multi-shot. Well, I'm too close to most of my targets for the long-range missiles to really have a good hit chance. But I could do multi-shot and fire them at a further target and then come to bear with all my medium lasers on someone else. And then there's Juggernaut, which allows melee strikes to knock a mech back in initiative, which I honestly never used. I didn't melee as...
I use that a lot.
I didn't melee as much as I probably thought I would have. It just... I had more overall power in my weapons, but I also was building where I wasn't redlining all the time. I only had a couple mechs that I had to cycle weapons in order to keep up a good chunk of my damage.
Yeah, most of my mechs ran hot, but I did a lot of melee-based combat. This is the first Mech Warrior, Battletech, whatever game that actually allows for melee combat. And the tabletop does. The tabletop has whole mechs built around melee combat. There are actually melee weapons like axes,
but not in the
swords,
game.
and shields.
Not in this game.
Not in the game, but you can still go punchy. And there are mechs that get bonuses to their melee damage because they have, for example, the Centurion has got a claw hand, and so it gets a melee damage bonus because it has a claw. So it's like a melee weapon.
You would think Wolverine would have claws.
You would think so.
But
yeah,
it's. I'm just looking at my list here to see what else there is. Unless you want to continue on this.
No. Let's see. The only major complaint that I have, outside of a few minor technical issues, I was fortunate to not have the game in 200 hours. The game crashed once.
Yeah, I had 3 hard crashes, crashed to desktop. I had a few lockups. And in the next to final mission, I had one time where it just didn't generate the salvage, which meant I couldn't continue on because I couldn't choose my salvage. The way it handles salvage is that whenever you negotiate a mission, on the random missions, you can choose if you want more salvage, more C-bills, money, or have less of one or both to gain more reputation with that faction. And depending on the amount of salvage you negotiate for, you have a certain amount of priority picks. You get first pick on, usually somewhere between 0 and I think the maximum is 7, and it changes depending on how much you negotiate for. Because it didn't generate the salvage, I couldn't do my priority picks, which means I couldn't continue on to the next screen where it assigns the rest because it's priority and then it's so many others. Even whenever you have no priority, I think you always get 2 picks at random from the AI. Yeah. Because I couldn't do that, I had to restart, and I didn't do a save during the mission. So I had to redo an entire about hour-long mission. And it was fucking tedious because that was also an escort mission. And allow me to, or partly escort, and I have to say, I fucking hate escort missions in this game. Particularly because the XO says, oh, they're going to follow your mechs. No. They're going to run ahead. And usually, once you get towards the 4 to 5 skull range, and you want to take heavier stuff, that's also less mobility, but the APCs that you're trying to escort are still as fast as hell, so they'll outrun you, run right into the enemy. And there was a couple times that I had one stop literally at the foot of an enemy mech, and it just stomped it. Fuck you on escort missions.
Yeah, the way to get around that is to just not trigger the escorts to spawn until you've gotten out ahead of them.
How am I supposed to do that when it spawns the reinforcements the APC runs right up to where the reinforcement's coming, and then it just stomps them. It's a spawn. It's not.
Yeah, the AI's pretty stupid.
But
I mean that goes for both sides because when you're doing a convoy ambush, the escorts will just or not the escorts, but the main convoy will just run right up next to your mechs, and you can do the same thing. So at least it's fair in that respect. It's stupid for both sides.
Yeah, the escort missions need to be completely redone. Where it follows the Lance, which is the group of mechs, and be able. I would also like it where you could give general commands to your allies, because on the final mission also you have 2 allied tanks, which vehicles in this game are fucking deadly. They're essentially mech weapons mounted to a small frame. And they could be devastating, particularly some of the carriers where they have 3 PPCs, which are just fucking devastating. Or was it 30 or 40 short-range missiles?
Yeah. No, they have more than that. I think they have 60 short-range missiles.
A ludicrous amount, enough to just kill something outright, up until the assault range of mechs, and even then, it's not going to be a pleasant day. That mech's going to be knocked down, pretty much guaranteed. But I would have loved to have had it where I could designate a target, or the AI would see, okay, they're targeting this mech, I'm going to focus on that. Instead, in that next last mission where you're assaulting the base to upload the virus. The first time I did that, they actually weakened a good chunk of the turrets. So whenever they tried to retake the base, they were able to kill the turrets a lot easier. Idiots. And this was after the turrets were shut down, by the way.
My biggest issue with the game comes down to some of the minutia of things that don't quite match up properly. I've bitched and bitched and bitched
Here we go.
about autocannons. They're too heavy. They don't get enough ammo. They cut the ammo in half from what the tabletop is. Most of the other weapons get more ammo per ton. The autocannon's ammo got cut in half, and they're all too heavy based on what they're supposed to be on the tabletop. So it's really difficult to make useful autocannon mechs, aside from the ones that are specifically designed around it, like the Jaeger mech or the Hunchback.
Yeah, the Hunchback. My Hunchback I nicknamed Bazooka Joe. I was just it was devastating because it would punch a hole in the armor, and then I would get a couple called shots, and something that was pretty dangerous would be down. Particularly,
and again, I assume
whenever something had less armor, just because of chance, it would be ramshackle or shoddy. So instead of full armor, it would be 50, 25%, so 75%. So that would be even more deadly. Okay, continue on.
And I assume it was done for game balance, but still, it annoys me because autocannons are one of my favorite classes of weapon. Autocannons and PPCs. And PPCs are still fine. They
melt mechs on both sides of the cannon.
Indeed, they generate the most heat out of any weapon, which is what they do in the tabletop and all the other games too. So it makes sense. A lot of people have bitched about those, but that's one of those things that I'm like, I mean, that's what the weapon is. It's really powerful, does a ton of stability damage, messes up their targeting systems for one turn so that they get a 1 difficulty increase on their attack. I can deal with that for some heat. But the other thing that annoys me is that they have this what's the weapon class called? The little ones, the anti-personnel weapons.
Machine guns.
Yeah, well, they're the machine guns, light lasers, and flamers.
The small lasers.
Yeah, or small lasers. And they're in this separate weapon category now.
Support.
So you can't put support weapons. So you can't put a machine gun in a ballistic weapon slot on a mech, which is frustrating as hell because some versions of the mechs, like for example the urban mech. The urban mech has got 3 or 4 ballistic hard points on the right side, but because machine guns are support weapons now, you can't actually use all of those hard points. It's impossible. And it's, even if the autocannons were the proper weight and the ammo was the proper amount, you still couldn't do it because there's not enough tonnage available on that mech. And so a lot of builds that worked in previous MechWarrior titles or Battletech titles no longer work because you can't put weapons where you have always been able to place them and can place them on the tabletop. And I don't know why they did that. The support weapons whenever you're in melee,
yeah.
They do, but I don't understand why you couldn't just attach a little tag or a modifier to those 3 specific weapons. Because it basically...
Well, they're not just melee if you're close enough, but it's pretty much right in someone's grill.
Yeah.
Or heatsink in this case.
And I just don't get it. And that annoys the shit out of me. Those 2 things, the autocannons and the support weapons. They bug the shit out of me.
I would also like to have seen the ability to add flamer fuel. Because each flamer only has, 6 shots? So using a fire starter of your own, you're good for 1 or 2 mechs, and that's pretty much it. Or, trying to use something to, take a mech to a biome, take a mech to a lunar biome, for example, that has a couple flamers on it to try to disable another mech to be able to get a couple good shots on it to maybe try to get a headshot so you get good salvage on it. Well, because of the limited fuel on it and the inability to add more, you're going to do it to 1 or 2 and then they're just dead weight. That's just a head scratcher, particularly because the machine guns, you're able to add as much ammo as you want, and the machine guns are better at disabling individual components in the mech once you strip off armor.
Yeah, they have a critical hit chance boost.
Yeah, and that's even before any pluses.
Yeah. So, those are my 2 big problems, my 2 nitpicks.
Yeah, I think mine is it doesn't give enough information for things that are very necessary, mostly around heat. It doesn't give enough information for movement. Even in the mech bay, but also on the battlefield, not be able to see impassable terrain. Some of the bugs, I had to actually dismiss a couple of my pilots because they were stuck with a negative attribute, the bad spirits attribute, which required them to use a lot more morale to be able to fire off a call shot at any point or vigilance. And one of them was built as a long-range sniper, which, I want to have a cold shot every so often. Well, because of bad spirits, they kept, using up twice as much. And once you go beyond 50% or below 50% morale, you also don't get the inspired buff, which gives you a bonus to hit, flat out. So it was a detriment to even use them, and they were dead weight on the roster and costing me a lot of money. So it's more bugs and information for me than anything else. And I hope that, I'll probably play this again after a while. I think I need a break from it. Seeing more variety on the mechs would be, add a lot more life to it, because I'm so tired of Wolverines, Thunderbolts, Locusts. And actually for a while I was seeing a bunch of Highlanders, which is weird because you were seeing none.
Yeah, I haven't seen a single Highlander outside of the one that it gives you for completing that one mission.
Yeah, for a while I was seeing nothing but Highlanders as assaults. Also, I would love to see a reason to actually have a good assortment outside of specializing certain mechs, being able to run more than a 4 mech lance, which I realize lore, but this is one of those weird squad-based strategy games where it doesn't give you the option to expand your roster you take in. And because of the overwhelming numbers at times, it almost feels like it's built around having, I would say, about 6 mechs at times.
Yeah.
Or even just be able to bring in a support vehicle to pilot.
Well, even lore-wise, I mean, a lance is 4 mechs, or really 4 units. A lance just means 4 units. But the clans use points, which are 5 units, and most mercenary companies
More
deploy
than one.
between
Yeah.
2 and 3 lances at a time. So this goes into something that I'd like to see in future releases as well. But the way that campaigns or that mercenary units typically work is not single mission contracts or even multi-mission contracts on a planet. Typically they would contract with a government for X amount of time, and then they would just serve essentially as part of, if not that government's armed forces for, X amount of time. So they would have permanent bases on planet and multiple lances of mechs, infantry, vehicles, aircraft. And, I understand they don't want to perhaps put everything in the game for you to control, but I would love to see longer form contracts on planets that allow you to deploy multiple lances. They've talked about having you be able to deploy additional forces so that you make more use of your mechs and pilots to like secondary battlefield objectives or like separate missions. Sort of like the mobile apps and the way the MMOs do stuff, where they're on a timer. And that's a step in the right direction, but yeah, I don't like the being artificially limited to one lance the entire game. It doesn't make any sense. Like in the beginning, it makes sense when you have, 4 or 5 mechs on a drop ship that's way too small, that's not meant to be used that way, but you're doing it anyways because you're scraping by. But once you upgrade to the Argo and you get, 18 battle mechs and 24 or 25 pilots, it's like, okay, come on, let's use more.
Yeah, it just feels like it's built around a system that they never were able to quite get in. And I do know that they were planning on more subsystems, but they just weren't able to get them to work right. Or play right, I should say. So maybe it's going to be in the DLC. Maybe we'll see patches for it. But I think that there's room for a lot more here. But there's also a lot of busy work. There's a lot of time wasting that really inflated my hours. I would say that I would probably about a third of my time was either moving between missions or just letting the clock run and waiting for mechs to be repaired.
Yeah. Going in and modding the files to have more missions per planet kind of eliminates that. Occasionally, like, I'll burn through all of my mechs and most of them will be damaged. I'm like, all right, it's time to move to a new planet, and then use the travel time to get all my mechs repaired. But yeah, I think unless you have other stuff, I think the only thing I'm left with is
it for me.
So a couple of things that I'd like to see in the future, like I said, those sort of long-term contracts with planets. I would love to see some sort of base beyond just the Argo. And I have no idea how this would work, but other mech games have let you have bases before that you take control of, and I think that goes hand in hand with long-term operations on a planet. More story campaigns, there's a huge universe and a shitload of lore to base some campaigns off of.
I hope any story campaigns that they do is makes you feel more like a central role instead of, oh, look, a distraction.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd love to see as well, like they advance the timeline a little bit, get into the 4th Succession War, the Clan Wars, more mechs. And more mechs. Because most of my favorite mechs, unfortunately, do come from the clan era. They're not necessarily all clan mechs, but there were a whole bunch of...
Well, I was going to say, and how about have it where the light mechs, the lighter mechs are more useful throughout the campaign?
Yeah. Yeah, if light mechs didn't have evasion stripped, maybe you had to fire at one twice, or they could only have their evasion stripped by sensor lock, or something like that. That would make sensor lock a lot more useful, and 2, that would make light mechs more viable on your side as well.
I didn't use sensor lock nearly as much. Mostly I had it just because when some of my pilots in the assault mechs to get Master Tactician to be able to move quicker.
Yeah.
granted, it's not a necessary thing, but yeah, for some of the mechs that are more single target anyway, it doesn't make sense to get multi-targeting.
Yeah.
But center lock, usually it was, something is slightly out of range and I want to pelt it for a while. And
Yeah.
missiles are just obnoxious.
They're not.
Well, I was taking 2 mechs in that each had at least 30 missiles.
Yeah.
Each.
Just take one mech that has 60 missiles.
I just put the pilot on top of a pod, on top of an LRM pod.
Yeah.
In the rumble seat, and that's it. Maybe strap a couple heat sinks to it.
Yeah. Strap a heat sink to the pilot. Here you go.
Well, considering my usual fire support pilot, he was completely silent. You'd hear him key up and then key off, and that's it. So, it's not like he would complain.
Yeah. So, overall,
this is definitely not a game for everyone, mostly because they don't do a great job of teaching you base mechanics outside of move and basic shooting. If you haven't played a turn-based squad tactics game, I would say go play XCOM first. Or go play Xenonauts first, or go play another game that teaches you a lot better. Because this teaches you the base mechanics, but it leaves a lot for you to figure out on your own.
Yeah.
Which is disappointing because I do want to suggest it a lot more, but between not teaching you a lot, it having some fucking infuriating mechanics, it being still buggy, my salvage bug was in the latest version just 2 nights ago. Some of the random difficulty spikes and having to essentially heavily modify the game to have it be not waste your time so much. It's a maybe if you're a fan of the genre or you like really, really stompy robots.
If you like the
if
genre,
you like the genre, it's worth it. But because it doesn't teach you, it's hard to suggest to someone that hasn't played a lot of squad strategy.
Yeah. If you like the genre, go for it. If you like big stompy mechs, potentially. If you have played games previously in the Mech Warrior and Mech Commander franchise, possibly. Overall, if I was gonna grade it, I'd say it's like an A minus, B plus, A minus. Trying to grade it as objectively as possible. I forgave a lot of its faults because of how invested I already was in the series and how much I like turn-based strategy games.
Yeah, I think I might be a little bit more realistic on this because I don't have the history with Battletech.
Yeah, it's regardless, it's definitely not like an A plus game.
Yeah, it's
maybe an A minus.
Yeah, it's definitely
probably
not the second
B+.
coming of Christ, even though some people were claiming it for a little bit.
Yeah.
If they could solve some of this stuff in patches, mostly revolving around the AI and how they show info, or if the mods are a little bit easier to handle, because right now you have to have a mod loader and it's a little finicky.
Yeah.
And every time they patch it, you have to go in and rerun an injector to write a DLL file or overwrite a DLL. And that's not something that's very user friendly. It's not terrible, but it's I don't like giving a game a complete pass just because mods can fix it. So it's tough for me to say that, even though I did enjoy most of my time with the game when it didn't bug out and leave me fucking infuriated.
Yeah. And that's another. I didn't experience most of the bugs that you did, so I don't have that as well. And that's,
Yeah, if
more anecdotal than
yeah,
anything.
if this wasn't a Gameclub game, whenever it bugged out on the last mission, I would have shut it down for a week or two because I was infuriated. Because that was an hour-long mission. And an hour-long tedious mission. It wasn't even difficult. They were talking about, oh, you need to be able to field multiple lances. That mission, I went in, and of course it's 3 mechs because it's a full lance, plus 2 APCs and 2 tanks on your side. 3 of my mechs, my 2 assaults that I took, because I had a fairly good stable of assaults by this point. Once I hit the point of no return, the option for it, I didn't have to grind as long as you did, but then again, I didn't build up as many pilots, so maybe that's it. The 2 assaults that I took, my 2 Highlanders, were just had damaged armor, which automatically gets repaired, so they are fucking pristine. As well as my fire support, which I was going to swap out for an Atlas anyway, fire support build for the final mission, because I was expecting that to be a lot tougher. And just the short-range brawler that I took, that is by design there to soak up a lot of damage, was the only one that was even damaged. So it was just tedious. It wasn't even tough.
Yeah.
So,
well, we talked about Battletech for a long time.
To be fair, I thought we expected that.
True. Very true. I think we went longer, though, than we expected. I think
you were lowballing.
But maybe so. Regardless, our next Gameclub game for June is going to be Tales from the Borderlands. So we're going from a much more mechanics-based game to a pretty much purely story-based game.
I don't have a problem with the Borderlands universe, outside of it being a little memey, so the story or the humor doesn't age quite as well. But I just got sick and tired of the first-person shooter, so this will be a way to experience it again.
Yeah. I still like the Borderlands games. I haven't played the pre-sequel, but I enjoy Borderlands 2.
I have no
I've played
interest in the
it a couple of
pre-sequel,
times.
mostly because Claptrap.
I like Claptrap. He's terrible, but I like him.
Rip his voice circuits out.
But I have been meaning to play Tales from Borderlands for quite some time now, and it just sort of came up.
Yeah,
we
did our
Gameclub game.
Did our usual 5 games off the list, and it's like, oh well, I never went through the games from Twitch Prime, which since I have Amazon Prime, I'm getting those now, and I was going to add those, and Borderlands, Tales from the Borderlands is on here. Hey, I've been wanting to play Tales from the Borderlands. Well, okay.
Indeed. So I'm looking at the time. And I need to be getting to bed soon. So let's move this on along.
Yeah, the 2 stories that we have, or the story we have, do we want to quickly comment just how fucking stupid Star Citizen is?
Yeah, we can do that real quick, and then let's skip. I guess we can read Kyle's tweet, but we'll skip Discovery Queue and close on out of the show. So yeah, Star Citizen is offering however
the
you
ludicrous
it,
pack,
but we're saying the ludicrous pack for $27,000 fucking dollars, and you can't even see what's in the pack unless you've spent $1,000 already.
Or you just go to what's this MMO Pulse to see it.
Yeah, you can see it there, but on their actual page, you can't even see it until you've spent $1,000. It's Star Citizen amazes me with how ridiculously crazy it is at this point.
Yeah, there's no way that Star Citizen's going to come out and not get hugely criticized. No way.
Yeah. No matter how good it potentially could be, it's going to receive a lot of rightful, justifiable criticism for how ridiculous this whole process has been with it.
Yeah, well, we should mention what the pack is. It's 117 ships and 163, total extra items like super colliders, service equipment, fuel pods, and various skins. It's still $27,000. It's just
Yeah.
it's just unfathomable that you could spend that much on virtual spaceships.
And I heard someone say, I don't know if this is true or not, but
Let's just
I heard
call it
someone say on
28,000
something
since you
that
have to spend 1,000 to be able to even fucking see it.
yeah, but I heard someone say on somewhere on a YouTube video I watched about this earlier that that's not even actually everything in the game.
Of course not.
I don't know if that's true or not. That's just what he said.
Think if you spent $27,000, that'd be like a lifetime pass. You get everything. But Green, it makes me wonder how they're going to fucking balance this, because they're selling so many, various packs of various, different ships, different various things. How are they going to balance this once this releases? Because right now, it's pretty much just the Wild West of, okay, here's this pack. Okay, here's this pack. Okay, now there's this pack. Is this just going to be, a pot of whales and that's it?
Maybe so. It still doesn't work on my computer.
Oh, I'm glad that there was this temptation at first when, Star Citizen first came out, and I think it was actually Scott Manley that was doing videos on it and was talking about, some of the cheaper packs that was, like 10 or 15 bucks at the time. And there was this temptation of, maybe, but I just didn't have the spare money at the time. I didn't want to, put it towards a game that's still years and years and years off, and now still years and years off, even, like 3 or 4 years now?
Yeah.
Just seeing this just puts me off of even ever wanting to play this, even though I'm not even sure how is this going to be a subscription model? This is going to be, pay once? Is it going to be free to play? What?
I think it's pay once.
Yeah.
I think.
I hope it's not $27,000.
I bought in at like the $25 mark 4 or 5 years ago at this point, and it's never worked on my PC ever, despite at this point 2 or 3 different hardware iterations and mini updates of the software. So I'm just like, maybe one day I'll get to play this game I spent some money on many years ago.
I don't want to call this a scam, but it feels like it's just a ringer of money. This is either going to be the biggest financial flop, or it's just going to be just this crazy, make WoW in its heyday look like nothing a success. But honestly, I'm just seeing, it's not seeing how this could be viable in the long run with $27,000 packs, essentially just upsetting the balance of the game. I mean, that's just huge pay to win, isn't it?
Yeah, I would think so. I don't know. This is crazy and stupid, and I'm sure people will buy it.
Yeah.
And honestly, if I had that kind of money, fuck you, I'd buy it.
If I had that kind of money,
I actually don't think I would, but like that would be my attitude.
I would hope I would have more sense.
Yeah, I would hope so too, but
yeah,
I'm
know. Just popping over to the Star Citizen subreddit because I want to see what people are saying, and there's a lot of people just ignoring this. Stop being unreasonable. Development is slow, but moving ahead. Is it unreasonable to expect something out after 4 years?
Nope. Not to normal people.
I think Star Citizen is kind of the definition now of feature creep. Or maybe, too large a scope.
Yeah.
Because they're just going absolutely stupid with some of the details. To both a good and a bad way. Because it is amazing just what they're doing with this game, but at the same time, it's ridiculous. Okay, let's see. Star Citizen off. Okay, here's the announcement thing. basically saying, yeah, that's a thing, pretty much. And everyone
Yep.
being very defensive, which I just don't get it. I really don't get how. Is this a combination of both? I'm too old and too poor.
No, this is just fucking bullshit, is what it is. That's all it is. They're doing it because they can, and they're gonna get away with it because
it's Star Citizen.
They're Star Citizen. All right. Well, I have to go to bed soon, so let's roll on.
I'm good. Whenever Star Citizen releases, there's going to be a lot of shrine for it, I think, on my part. Just watching the whales. Okay. So, tweets. We had Kyle tweet. Let me scroll down. Contribulations. And that's it.
Yay.
If you wish to email us,
Kyle.
VGLpodcast@gmail.com, or tweet us like Kyle did, VGL Podcast on the Twitter. And part of the podcast where you go first, since we're skipping Discovery Queue.
Indeed. I have things on YouTube. Gaming Psychologist. Twitter, @JMA4707. On Twitch, twitch.tv/jarthur4707. And you can be my friend on Steam. My username is jarthur4707.
Well, that's the fastest you ever went through that. And
I'm going to have to take a nap at work tomorrow somehow. I might have to suck it up and sleep on the floor.
Sorry. And if you wish to want to know exactly what episode of the podcast you're coming from, the password for this week is hernia. What I'm trying to avoid, a hernia.
Indeed.
And my channel is in basically low power standby mode with just RimWorld, and I'm going to try to get a Sunday sampler done, just a bit of a talkie bit, because my backup game, I played it a bit, and it sucked. It was a little simple platformer that just handled horribly. It looked nice, and that was about it. It was pretty, but I just couldn't stomach playing it enough to be able to even give a decent opinion on it outside of this control scheme sucks. It's too floaty, and it's too imprecise to be as precise a platformer as it wants to be. So, RimWorld on Gaming with Caffeine Rage, or you could see me tweet, probably rather boredly, from the new apartment via mobile on Gaming with a CR. And if you wish to catch the RSS feed, VGLpodcast.podbean.com. And we're on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, which is also paid for by our Patreon. Patreon.com/VGLpodcast, which pays for this absolute madness. Or you can just email us, VGLpodcast@gmail.com, or tweet us, VGLpodcast, on Twitter with your letters, voicemails, gaming-related topics, questions, random comments, or vague threats for talking about Battletech for 3 fucking hours. Our intro and outro music is On the Ground by Kevin McLeod, and find his work at incompetech.com. And
as always, as his lovely music starts to roll across my
and your
voice.
snores.
Bye now.
See you next time.